Hey everyone, tonight we're diving deep into a story that feels like it was deliberately misplaced by history. We're heading to the West African Sahel, a place where the air is so dry it feels like it could crackle into flame from static electricity alone. You're standing on reddish-brown earth, cracked and webbed like a dry riverbed, and the only sound is the persistent, whispery rustle of wind through brittle grass. In the distance, a line of riders kicks up a plume of dust that stains the horizon. These aren't just any riders, they are the defense system of one of the most resilient political entities in African history. And let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive this. Not the battle, just the afternoon. The heat is a physical weight, the water is scarce, and probably tastes like mud. And the local political etiquette is so complex, you'd probably start a war just by using the wrong greeting. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. As always, I love to see where this is reaching, so please post your location and your local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to see us scattered across the globe, all listening to the same story. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're not just a spectator, you're in this. You're a courtier, perhaps a merchant, or maybe just a traveler who has found themselves in the heart of the Mossi kingdoms. This isn't one place, it's a collection of powerful states. Dankodogo, Ouagadougou, Fada Nguma, and Zondo Mud dominate this vast, arid landscape in what we now call Burkina Faso. This is the 16th, maybe 17th century. The exact date is hazy, as it always is in stories that rely more on oral tradition than written ledgers. What you do know is that these kingdoms are old. They are powerful, and they are built on horses. You see them everywhere. Small, tough-looking horses, tethered outside the round mud-brick compounds of the nobility. They aren't the towering war horses of European knights. They are compact, resilient, and perfectly adapted to this brutal environment. They are the nucleus of Mossi power. The Mossi kingdoms themselves are a mainstream historical fact, a bastion of pre-colonial African statecraft that famously resisted invasions for centuries. Long before the French arrived, they were fending off the great Songhai and Mali empires. They were the immovable object in the center of the regional map, the stubborn kingdom of horsemen that refused to be conquered. You're trying to navigate the social currents of the court in Ouagadougou. It's difficult. This is a place where etiquette is a weapon. Here is a quirky tidbit for you. Mossi court life was governed by an incredibly rigid set of protocols, known as the mogo. A simple gesture, like how you accept a gourd of water or whether you crouch or bow before a noble, isn't just politeness. It's a declaration of your understanding of the social order. A noble might offer his hand, but you, as a commoner, are expected to touch the ground first, then tap his hand lightly. Get it wrong, and you're not just rude, you're uncivilized. A person without a place in the system, which is a very dangerous thing to be. It's a social minefield where one misplaced thank you could imply you think the noble is your equal, which they do not appreciate. You've heard whispers about the power structure here. It's not as simple as a king giving orders. There's a whole parallel court, a world of influence run by women, but we'll get to that. What matters right now is the tension in the air. The dry season is ending, and the winds are shifting. From the south, from the coast, there are stories. They are fragmented, carried by salt merchants and refugees. Stories of new men, pale men in some cases, but mostly their local agents ruthless, well-armed and hungry. Not for gold, not for salt, but for people. This is the central anxiety of your world. The Mossi kingdoms are powerful, yes, but they are also a target. They are populous, organized, and represent a massive, tempting source of potential captives for the burgeoning Atlantic slave trade. This is where our story begins. Not with the trade itself, but with the bulwark that stood against it. You're standing in a region that's a crossroads, but also a fortress. Historians still argue whether the Mossi states constituted a unified, centralized empire or were a loose federation of allied kingdoms. When you're standing here, in the dusty courtyard of the Mogo Naba, the ruler in Ouagadougou, it feels like both. You see the deference given to him, the elaborate rituals that confirm his supremacy. But you also hear the grumblings of his brothers, the rulers of the other kingdoms. They are bound by a shared ancestry and a common enemy. But you also see the rivalries, the constant low-level jockeying for prestige and resources. This complex web of alliances and bloodlines is the stage. Our focus, however, isn't on the kings. It's on the woman who is, at this very moment, inspecting a row of those tough, wiry horses. She is a princess, a Queen Toby, or perhaps a Queen Mother in Ablis. And she isn't just looking at the horses, she's calculating, she's planning. She is the mind behind the cavalry that will become the shield of her people. You watch her move through the compound. She doesn't command with shouts, but with a quiet, intense scrutiny. The guards, the soba, or cavalrymen, watch her with a mixture of reverence and professional respect. She is the one who understands the new threat. The raiders from the south don't fight like the Songhai. The Songhai wanted to conquer, to rule, to tax. These new raiders don't want territory. They want bodies. They strike fast, at villages, at travelers, at farms, and they vanish before the Mossi cavalry can rally. But this queen, she's developing a new tactic, a new way of thinking. She is blending the old ways, the thundering cavalry charge, that the Mossi are famous for, with something new, intelligence, rapid response, and a ruthlessness that matches the enemy. The air is thick with the smell of millet dust, horse sweat, and the faint, smoky tang of cooking fires. You pull your shawl tighter, even in the heat, as the sun begins to dip, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and purple. This is the world you're in. It's not a safe world. It's a world balanced on the back of a horse and on the edge of a sword. And in this world, a queen with a cavalry is the only thing standing between 1,000 villages and the long, terrible journey to the coast. You're still in that courtyard, the air cooling rapidly as the sun dies. That tension you feel, that sense of a new, creeping danger from the south, is rattling a very old and complicated system. To understand what our queen is up against, you have to zoom out. Imagine you're floating above the Reederth compounds, rising higher and higher until you can see the great bend of the Niger River to the north and west, and the vast, dense forests of the coast to the south, still hundreds of miles away. You are looking at the political map of 16th century West Africa. Forget the straight-line borders, you know. This is a map of influences, a watercolor painting of power where colors bleed into one another. The most obvious, mainstream historical fact of your time is the Colossus to your north, the Songhai Empire. Under Askia Muhammad, it has become one of the largest empires in the world, stretching from the Atlantic coast deep into the Sahara. Its cities Timbuktu, Gao, Jenar, legendary centers of Islamic scholarship and trade. They are wealthy beyond imagining, built on the control of trans-Saharan trade routes. Gold flows north. Salt, a substance more precious than gold in the salt poor south, flows south. The Songhai are the regional superpower, and for centuries, their relationship with the Mossi kingdoms has been ... spicy. The Mossi famously sacked Timbuktu in 1329, a long time ago, but nobody forgets, and have been a thorn in the side of every major empire that tried to subdue them. To the west, the old Mali Empire, the one of Mansa Musa fame, is in its twilight, a shadow of its former self, but its cultural legacy is everywhere. To the east, the Bornu Empire is another major player. And where are you in all this? You're in the Mossi kingdoms, the stubborn center. You aren't one giant purple blob on this map. You are a cluster of fiercely independent, related states. You're the buffer, you're the crossroads, you're the region that refuses to be neatly absorbed. This brings us to a really interesting scholarly debate. Look at your neighbors, the Songhai, the Hausa city-states, the Bornu Empire. They are profoundly Islamic. Their rulers sponsor mosques, their courts are filled with Islamic jurists, their trade is conducted in Arabic. But here in Ouagadougou, things are different. Historians still argue whether the Mossi kingdom's famed resistance to Islam, which dominated their neighbors, was a deliberate political policy of cultural preservation, or simply a result of their decentralized rural structure. You see Muslim merchants, the Yars living here in their own distinct communities, protected by the Mogo Naba. They are vital for trade, especially for horses from the north. But the court itself, the rituals, the power, the source of the king's authority, it's not derived from the Quran. It comes from the Tengandi, the priests of the earth, from the veneration of ancestors, and from a lineage that traces back to a single foundational myth. It's a pragmatic, complex coexistence. Now, let's talk trade, because this is where things get quirky. You're used to thinking of gold as the big-ticket item, and it is. But the real obsession here, the thing that greases the wheels of politics and daily life, is the kola nut. This is your quirky tidbit. The kola nut is a bitter, caffeine-loaded nut grown in the forests to the south in Akan territory, modern-day Ghana. It's a social lubricant, a ritual offering, a stimulant, and a massive source of trade wealth. Mossi merchants, and the Yars in particular, are the essential middlemen. They control the routes north, bringing kola to the Songhai, where it's chewed by students in Timbuktu trying to memorize the Quran all night. In return, they bring down that vital northern commodity, salt, and, more importantly, horses. This entire intricate system Songhai to the north, forest kingdoms to the south, Mossi in the middle is the Old World, and that Old World has a dark side that long predates the first European ship. This is a world where slavery is an established, if brutal, part of the economy. The trans-Saharan trade, the one that makes the Songhai rich, isn't just gold and salt, it's also captives. For centuries, warfare between states or raids on non-Mossi, non-Songhai so-called pagan peoples has produced captives who are marched north across the desert to be sold in the markets of North Africa. Our Mossi queen knows this world. She is part of this world. Her own cavalry, the very force she's counting on, is often paid for and equipped through this grim economy. A powerful cavalry requires a constant supply of new horses, and the best way to get those horses from the northern merchants is to trade ... captives. So, you see the complexity. You're not standing in a peaceful kingdom of victims. You're standing in a tough, pragmatic, 16th century state that has mastered the brutal politics of its region. And now, everything is changing. The old trade, the one that went north, is being challenged. The new threat you've been feeling, those whispers from the south, is a different beast. The Portuguese, and now others, have built forts on the coast. They aren't interested in the long, arduous trek across the Sahara. They don't ships, and they don't want a few captives at a time, traded for salt and cloth. They want thousands, tens of thousands. They are offering firearms, brandy, and iron bars in quantities that are warping the entire political landscape. This new Atlantic trade is pulling the entire region's center of gravity south. It's creating new aggressive powers on the coast, like the Dahomey and Asante, though they'll come a bit later in their full strength, who are now willing to raid inland to get captives to sell for guns, so they can get more captives to sell for more guns. This is the map our queen is looking at. The old enemy, the Songhai Empire, is a known quantity. You fight, you win, you lose, you pay tribute, you raid them back. It's a familiar, if violent, dance, but this new enemy is an invisible, insatiable mouth. It doesn't want to rule you, it wants to consume you, and it's arming your worst neighbors to do the job. You watch her as she finishes her inspection. Her power, her ability to command these horsemen, doesn't just come from her title. It comes from a source much older, a story that every Mossi child knows by heart. It's the story of where the Mossi came from. It's the story of a woman on a horse, awaiting that story, the one that every child in the compound knows by heart, the one that gives our queen her unshakable authority. It's the story of Yenenga. You find yourself one evening sharing a meal of tea, a thick millet paste, with a family of weavers. The sun is gone, the stars are brilliant and fierce in the ink-black sky, and a Griatan oral historian, a living library of memory and music, is telling the story. His voice rises and falls, accompanied by the rhythmic pluck of a kora or ngoni. He doesn't just tell the story, he paints it for you. You see Yenenga. This is centuries ago, back in the 14th century in the kingdom of Dagamba to the south. She is the daughter of the Naba Ndega, the king of Gambaga, and she's not like other princesses. She is tall, strong, and a master of the javelin. She is her father's favorite child, and more importantly, his greatest warrior. You see her, dressed in men's armor, leading the Dagamba cavalry, a red plume on her helmet. She is so valuable as a military commander that when she comes of marrying age, her father refuses all suitors. He will not lose his best general to a husband. This is the mainstream historical fact of the legend, the core of the entire Mossi identity. Yenenga is loyal, but she is also trapped. She wants a family, a life beyond the battlefield. One night, her frustration boils over. She plants a field of okra, and when it grows, she lets it rot. A bitter, symbolic gesture to show her father the life, the fertility she is wasting. He doesn't understand, so one night she makes her choice. Aided by a loyal servant, She disguises herself as a man, mounts her favorite stallion, Magnificent. Intelligent white horsehand rides out with a contingent of cavalry, supposedly on a raid. But, as the battle rages, Yeninga's stallion, sensing her deep despair and her desire to escape, veers away from the fight. It bolts. It carries her away deep into the wilderness, galloping for hours until they are hopelessly lost in the dense, unfamiliar forest to the north. She rides until the horse is exhausted, until she is alone in a land she does not know. This is the land that will become the Mossi kingdom. There, lost and alone, she meets a man. He's not a prince. He is Riali, a solitary elephant hunter, a man of the forest. He is a Bisa, one of the local people, a Mang of the earth. He is everything she is not. She is royalty, he is a commoner. She is a warrior of the savannah, he is a hunter of the deep woods. She is a Nakams, a rider, he is a Tengabisi, a son of the soil. They fall in love. And from this union, this fusion of foreign noble cavalry, Yanenga, and local autochthonous knowledge, Riali, a son is born. Here's the quirky tidbit that ties it all together. They name him Oudrago, and that name, in the local language, means male horse or stallion. It's in honor of the magnificent horse that carried Yanenga to her destiny, the horse that founded their entire people. To this day, Oudrago is one of the most common and noble surnames in Burkina Faso. You've probably met a dozen men named Oudrago just in this one compound. They are all, in spirit, sons of the stallion. This son, Oudrago, grows up, travels back to his mother's homeland in Gambaga, gets a cavalry from his grandfather, and returns to this land to establish the first Mossi kingdom, Tenkodogo, which means ancient land. His own sons will go on to found the other great Mossi states. The griot finishes his story. The music fades. You look around at the firelit faces. They're not just listening to a quaint myth. They are hearing their constitution, their genealogy, and their political charter all in one. But as a critical observer, you can't help but wonder. Historians still argue whether Yanenga was a real historical figure or a purely symbolic representation of the fusion of two different cultures. Is this a literal story of a Dagomba princess who eloped with an elephant hunter? Or is it a masterful piece of political allegory? A story crafted to legitimize a new ruling class? A story that explains how a group of foreign Dagomba horsemen moved north, married the local earth pre-sold communities represented by Riali, and created a new dual system of power. The Nakums rulers from Yeninga's line who controlled the people and the cavalry, and the Tengabizi people of the earth who controlled the land itself and its spiritual harmony. In this world, both are true. The story is the fact. You look back at our queen, the one you saw inspecting her troops. She is a descendant of Yanenga. That is the source of her power. The myth gives female royalty a specific foundational role that cannot be erased. And here is the paradox. In a quirky twist, because Yanenga's ride was so sacred and singular, Mossi women after her were generally forbidden from riding horses, and certainly from being cavalry warriors. It was a taboo. So our queen doesn't rule like Yanenga. She doesn't lead the charge with a javelin in hand. Her power is different. It's the power of the Abless, the Queen Mother. The Yanenga myth carves out a space for female authority at the very center of the kingdom's founding. It says that without the princess, there is no kingdom. Without the stallion, there is no Oudrago. This legacy is the political and spiritual capital she is spending. When she gives an order to a Soba cavalryman, he doesn't just hear a woman, he hears the echo of the foundational stallion. Her authority is ancient, absolute, and woven into the very name of the people she is protecting. It's this deep, mythic power that she must now wield, not against a rival kingdom, but against the faceless, nameless, and relentless threat creeping in from the coast. She is the inheritor of Yenenga's strategic mind, and she's going to need it. So, you now understand the myth. Yanenga, the stallion, the son named Oudrago. It's the origin story that gives female authority its roots. But you're in the present of the 16th or 17th century, and you've realized that, as we mentioned, our queen isn't actually allowed to be Yanenga. The taboo against women riding, especially into war, is firm. Her power, therefore, isn't the power of the spear. It's the power of the throne, a different throne, a parallel one. You're standing in a different part of the royal compound. It's not the main audience hall of the Mogonaba, the king. That place is all bluster, horses, and armed soba waiting for orders. This place is busier. It's an economic hub. Scribes are tallying sacks of millet. Merchants are respectfully waiting for an audience. A delegation of weavers is showing off new textiles. You're in the court of the Obelisk, the Queen Mother, and you need to get the European image of a Queen Mother out of your head right now. This isn't a dowager, a respected elder who offers gentle advice and lives in a comfortable retirement wing of the palace. No, the mainstream historical fact is that the Obelisk, or, in some Mossi states, the Pugakama, the elder sister of the king, which was often a more powerful political title, was a fully fledged political office. She was a chief in her own right, with her own court, her own ministers, her own villages, and her own treasury. She wasn't powerful because she was the king's mom. She was powerful because she held an office that was a structural and permanent part of the Mossi state. Our queen is this obelisk, and her power is concrete. You watch her hold court. A man comes before her, a district chief. He isn't here to pay respects, he's here to pay taxes, and he's not paying them to the Mogonaba, he's paying them to her. This is the quirky and crucial tidbit. The obelisk commanded vast personal estates, villages, and lands that were hers and hers alone. She levied her own taxes, collected her own tribute of grain, cattle, and iron, and controlled her own markets. She was, in modern terms, the CEO of a massive parallel corporation nested inside the state. She was independently, massively wealthy. This isn't soft power. This is hard economic power. While the king is busy with diplomacy and war, the obelisk is often in charge of the agricultural surplus, the internal markets, and the social order. It's a brilliant political system, really. It's like having a separate coup to handle the actual logistics of the entire country, leaving the CEO to deal with hostile takeovers. And you see how this plays out. A cavalry commander, a soba, enters her court. He bows, not with the performative flourish he gives the king, but with the direct professional respect of an employee reporting to his boss. He's here because his troops are fed with millet from her granaries. The horses he needs are bought from northern merchants at a market she controls. When our queen speaks, she isn't just advising the king, she's making a statement about her resources. She can, quite literally, fund or defund a military campaign. This brings us to the central scholarly debate of the system. You see the king in his court and the queen in hers. Historians still argue whether the obelisk's power was a true check on the Mogonaba's authority or a safety valve designed to manage the Mala-dominated court's internal conflicts. Was she a genuine coroller, a balance of power? Or was her role a clever way to siphon off all the internal, domestic, and lineage-based squabbles, letting the king get on with the big issues of war? From where you're standing, it looks like a bit of both. But right now, with this new threat from the slave raiders, her role is changing. The raiders aren't a war in the old sense. They aren't the Songhai army marching on the capital. They are a resource problem. They are attacking the farms, the villages, the people, all the things that fall under the obelisk's traditional portfolio. This is why our queen is the one taking charge. The raiders are a direct attack on her power base, on her resources. The king might see it as a border skirmish. She sees it as an existential economic and demographic threat. So you watch her make her moves. She isn't just suggesting a new strategy, she's funding it. She dispatches agents, paid from her own treasury, to the markets to gather intelligence. She uses her control of the millet surplus to create strategically placed food depots for her cavalry patrols, allowing them to stay in the field longer, far from the capital. She's not asking, she's doing. She is the logistics. She is the supply chain. She's the quartermaster-riffy of the entire Mossi defense. And that's why she was inspecting those horses. They may technically belong to the state, but they eat her grain. And as anyone in a bureaucracy knows, the person who controls the budget and the food is the person with the real power. It's less Game of Thrones and more The Wire, a slow, grinding, and deeply intelligent application of resources. She is a true non-ceremonial political and economic force, and she is turning that force toward a single goal: protecting her people by perfecting the kingdom's ultimate weapon. You're watching the obelisk make these critical, strategic decisions, managing her vast portfolio of millet, iron, and political favor. But all this economic power, is being funneled into one single, indispensable military asset: the Mossi warhorse. Let's leave the Queen's court and walk over to the compounds where the soba, the cavalrymen, are quartered. You have to get the image of a European stable out of your head. You don't see long rows of wooden stalls. Instead, you see the horses tethered right in the central courtyards of the family compounds. Standing in the shade of the few precious trees right next to the round mud brick huts where the families live. Now, look at the horse itself. This is the mainstream historical fact of the Mossi military. This is not the massive heavy-boned destrier of a European knight, bred to carry a man in 100 pounds of steel plate. The Mossi warhorse is a smaller, wiry, and incredibly tough animal. It likely descends from the Barb horse of North Africa or is a cross with the local Dongula breed. It's an animal of the Sahel. It stands maybe 14 or 15 hands high, with a sleek coat, a high-held tail, and an expression of fiery intelligence. It's built for endurance, not for a single, overwhelming charge. It's hedge-resistant, can survive on the sparse, dry forage of the region, and can travel for incredible distances without breaking down. This horse is the Mossi kingdom. It is the tank, the fighter jet, and the status symbol of this entire society. These animals are insanely valuable, and here's why. They can't really be bred here in large numbers. The Mossi kingdoms sit on the northern edge of the tsetse fly belt. This little insect, as you know, carries trypanosomiasis, or sleeping sickness, a disease that is absolutely lethal to horses and cattle. This means the Mossi cavalry is not self-sustaining. It relies on a constant, expensive, and politically delicate supply line. Every single warhorse you see has been imported, walked hundreds of miles south by the Yars, the Muslim merchant class, from the markets along the Niger Bend. In the heart of the Songhai and Malian lands, they are traded for gold, for salt, for fine textiles, and, as we've noted, for captives. This makes each horse an extraordinary investment, worth more than a dozen slaves or a field of millet. And this leads to our quirky tidbit. You see a high-ranking soba lovingly wiping down his stallion. As evening approaches, he doesn't just check its tether. He leads the horse inside his own hut, right into the single round room where his family sleeps. This was a common practice. These horses were so precious that warriors would keep them in their homes. It's a 17th century alarm system. It prevents theft, which is a constant, massive risk. A stolen horse isn't like a stolen goat, it's a stolen tank. It also protects the animal from the night-prowling tsetse flies, as the smoke from the family's cooking fire acts as a repellent. It's an act of profound economic and even spiritual protection. The warrior and his mount are a single unit, living and sleeping together. You watch the soba train in the dusty field outside the main compound. Their riding style is incredible. They ride with a short stirrup, or sometimes just a single loop for the big toe, or with a wide, flat stirrup sandal that protects their whole foot. Some ride with a complex high-backed saddle, but many ride on a simple padded cloth or even bareback. They are master horsemen, able to spin, feint, and swerve with a fluidity that looks like water. They don't carry heavy lances. They are armed with a handful of light, iron-tipped javelins, a long spear, and a distinctive cross-hilted sword. This is where you hit the scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the Mossi cavalry's long-running military success was due to the superior quality and endurance of their imported horses or a result of their lighter, more flexible tactics and the mastery of their unencumbered riders. Was it the tech, the horse, or the software, the tactics? The European heavy cavalry was designed to break a line of infantry with one devastating, armor-piercing charge. The Mossi Soba was designed to do the opposite. They were a swarm. They would ride at an enemy, throw a volley of javelins with pinpoint accuracy, and then feign a retreat, scattering before any countercharge, only to regroup, reload, and attack from a different flank. They were a nightmare for slow-moving infantry. They would harass, surround, and exhaust an enemy, cutting off their supply lines, picking off stragglers, and vanishing before a real battle could be joined. This is the military machine our Ablis is funding. She's not just buying horses, she's maintaining a complex system of noble warriors, the Nakamans, the descendants of Yanenga, whose entire identity is fused with these animals. The Soba is the aristocracy. To be a noble is to be a horseman. And now, this perfect ancient system of warfare is about to be tested by a new and terrifying force. The reports you've been hearing, the whispers from the salt merchants, they're no longer whispers. They are the screams of refugees. That new force, it doesn't arrive like an army. There is no declaration of war, no dusty column of riders appearing on the horizon. It arrives as a whisper, a rumor that curdles the blood, and you're in the middle of the main market in Ouagadougou when you first hear it. This market is the kingdom's beating heart. It's a chaotic, vibrant, noisiest little place. You're smelling the sharp tang of dried fish, the earthy scent of millet flour, the metallic smell of the blacksmith's forges, and the sweet, powerful aroma of the cola nuts being haggled over. It's loud, it's normal, it's the center of your world. Then you see them, a small group of people huddling near the gate. They're not merchants. They have nothing to sell. They're not locals. Their clothing and scarification marks are wrong. They are Bisa from one of the southernmost villages, a place that exists on the fuzzy border between the Mossi savanna and the great forests, and they are utterly terrified. They are exhausted, their feet are bloody, and they speak in low, urgent tones to the guards. You're a courtier, you have some standing, so you move closer. Your curiosity overpowering your initial unease, you listen. Their story tumbles out in a torrent of fear. Their village was attacked at dawn, but it wasn't a familiar raid. It wasn't the usual back and forth for cattle or a local skirmish. It wasn't the Songhai. It wasn't a rival Mossi kingdom. These were new men, strangers. They came from the forest, and they weren't after grain. They wanted people. They took the young, the strong. They chained them, a long coffle of human beings, and marched them south back into the forest. Back toward the coast. This part is alarming, but it's the next detail that makes no sense. The village chief, a brave man, had rallied his few guards. They had their spears. The raiders, the refugees say, just laughed. They didn't have spears. They had fire sticks. This is where the listeners in the market get skeptical. Magic, one person mutters. Bad juju. But the refugee, a woman with tears cutting lines through the dust on her face, shakes her head violently. Not magic, she insists. It was like thunder. A stick that spits fire and thunder. And my husband? He just fell. No spear, no arrow. He just fell. His chest was gone. This is the mainstream historical fact that is arriving, garbled and terrifying at your feet. The introduction of European firearms via the Atlantic coast. These raiders are almost certainly other West African groups' intermediaries, not Europeans. They are coastal or forest peoples who have made contact with the Portuguese, the Dutch, or the English. They have traded a few captives for a shipment of early matchlock or flintlock muskets. And now they are using that devastating technological advantage to acquire more captives to trade for more guns. The gun-slave cycle has begun, and you are seeing its first bloody tendrils reach the Mossi heartland. A few Soba, the proud cavalrymen you were just watching, have gathered to listen. They are openly dismissive. One of them pats the thick, quilted cotton armor he wears, a fire stick. Our armor can stop an arrow. Our horses are faster than thunder. They laugh. It's nervous laughter. Here is your quirky and frankly terrifying tidbit. The description of these new weapons is so alien that the Mossi language in this moment has no word for it. It has to be described in metaphor: thunderstick, fire spitter, magic pipe. This total lack of a category for the weapon makes it seem, as the crowd suggested, like a supernatural force. And for all practical purposes, it is Soba's entire training is based on closing the distance, on deflecting a spear, on dodging an arrow. How do you dodge a piece of metal moving faster than you can see? How does your horse, the center of your universe, react when the man next to you explodes in a cloud of smoke and noise? The Soba walk away, back to their horses, projecting an air of total confidence. But you saw their eyes. You leave the market and head back to the Abbess's court. The news has already reached her. But she's not listening to the terrified refugees. She's in a quiet, intense discussion with one of the Rs, a high-level merchant who has just returned from a long 12-month journey to the south, skirting the edges of the Akan forests to trade for cola nuts. He confirms everything. He saw them, not the raiders, but the men they trade with. He speaks of new, powerful chiefs rising up near the coast. They have hundreds of these fire sticks. They have small, terrifying metal firepots cannons that they bought from pale men who live in giant wooden houses on the water. These new chiefs, he says, are no longer interested in the old trade gold for salt, textiles for cola. They only want one thing: Anjonu captives. Now, the room is very, very still. This is where the scholarly debate becomes a life-or-death reality. Historians still argue about the speed and degree to which European firearms penetrated the deep Sahel. Was it a slow trickle, or a flood that destabilized the region decades before the French and British ever marched inland? From where you're standing, in the Abbasis court, you've just seen the answer. It's a flood, and it's coming fast. The century-old dominance of the Mossi cavalry, the entire military and social structure built on the horse, has just been rendered obsolete by a new technology. The Soba may be laughing, but our queen, the Abbasis, is not. She understands logistics, she understands technology, and she knows, with a dreadful, cold certainty, that a man with a musket can kill a man on a horse before that horse even breaks into a gallop. The game has changed. The whispers from the coast are now a scream, and all of her power, all of her millet, and all of her sacred Yenengadescent authority must now be bent to solving this single impossible problem. You're watching her, this Abbasis, as she processes the news of the fire sticks. The Yars merchant has finished his report, and the air in the room is thick and cold with this new, terrifying knowledge. The Soba, who laughed it off in the market, are nowhere to be seen. This is a problem for the High Court. And as you watch her, you realize she's not afraid. She's calculating. She is the product of a lifetime of training, forged from childhood for this exact kind of crisis. This is a problem of strategy, of economics, of adaptation. This is her battlefield. Now, we need to be clear. As we discussed, the Yenenga myth is so powerful that it creates a taboo. Our queen is not a warrior in the mold of her ancestor. She does not ride into battle. But the bullet point says equestrian training, and you've been wondering how that fits. Here's how. You're flashing back seeing her as a child, a young princess in this very compound. From the moment she could walk, she was around horses. The mainstream historical fact is that for the Nakams, the ruling class, the horse was the symbol of their identity. So yes, she was taught to ride. She had to be. It was part of her education as a noble, a way of connecting her physically to the Yenenga legacy. She learned to ride with the same confidence and grace as her brothers. But her training veered off. While the boys were learning to throw javelins from a gallop, she was being taught something far more valuable. Her rigorous equestrian training wasn't about combat. It was about logistics. She wasn't taught how to fight on a horse. She was taught how to field a cavalry. Her tutors were not Soba. They were the quartermasters, the Yars horse traders, and her own mother, the previous Abbasis. She learned how much millet a horse needs per day. She learned to spot the subtle signs of sickness, the tsetse flies, cursed before it could spread. She learned the brutal, unglamorous math. How many captives, or how many sacks of salt, or how many bars of iron, equaled one healthy stallion from the north. She learned the trade routes, the names of the merchant families, and the precise, brutal cost of defending the kingdom. Her other classroom was the market. And this is the quirky tidbit. Her strategic education likely came from playing games. You see her as a young woman sitting across from her uncle, playing a game of Mancala, or a local variant, often called Wari or Ao. It's a simple board, just 2 rows of pits and a handful of seeds. But it's a game of pure, cold strategy. It's about counting, about resource allocation, about looking 10 moves ahead. It's about knowing when to sacrifice your seeds in one pit to capture a larger prize in another. It's about hoarding, and it's about attacking. This game, played in the shade of a baobab tree, was her war college. It taught her to think like a general, managing a finite pool of resources against a clever opponent. When you combine that logistical horse myth with that abstract strategic mind, you get the woman you see today. She is a warrior, but her weapon is her intellect. She understands the kingdom not as a map, but as a resource flow chart. And this is where the academic debate lies. Historians still argue whether the political training of royal Mossi women was intended to make them autonomous rulers, like the Abbasis, or simply to make them more valuable, intelligent advisors to their husbands and brothers. Was this education meant to empower her to rule, or to make her a better asset for the king? You're watching her in this moment, and you have your answer. The king is probably in his hall, wondering which border to send the Soba to. The Abbasis, on the other hand, is already playing Mancala in her head. She has just learned the opponent has a new, devastating piece. She's not panicking, she's recalculating, she's reevaluating her entire board. She knows her cavalry, as it stands, is useless in a hidden fight against muskets. The Horsenjavan tactic is dead. But she also knows the raiders' weaknesses. They are slow. A coffle of captives can't move fast. They have a limited supply of that firepowder and metal shot which they can't make. They must be getting it from the coast. They are predictable, striking at soft targets, the undefended villages. She doesn't need to defeat them in a battle. She needs to make the raids unprofitable. She is a warrior forged not by the spear, but by the granary, the market, and the game. And she is about to deploy a strategy that the Firestick Raiders will never see coming. But first, she has to understand the enemy's own system. She needs to understand the grim, brutal business model that is funding this new wave of terror. You're in the Abliss's court. She's thinking like her opponent. To defeat a business, you have to understand its balance sheet. What is the product? What is the cost? What is the profit? And as she games this out, you realize she's not just learning a new system, she's comparing it to the one she already knows. And this is where your 21st century comfort gets a sharp, cold shock. The brutal economics of the slave trade. Well, that's not new here. Not at all. You need to understand this, or you'll misunderstand everything. The mainstream historical fact is that the trans-Saharan slave trade is an ancient, established, and integral part of the Sahelian economy, and has been for centuries. This is the old system. For almost 1,000 years, a steady flow of captives has been marched north from this region. They crossed the vast, empty quarter of the Sahara, a journey far more deadly than the Atlantic's Middle Passage to the markets of North Africa, the Middle East, and the Ottoman Empire. This trade is part of the world's oldest and richest trade route. It says the same route that carries the gold from the south and brings the salt from the north. The Mossi kingdoms and their neighbors have been part of this system forever. It's a raider economy, but it's an old, stable one, governed by certain ... rules. In this old system, slaves were typically prisoners of war, captured in legitimate conflicts between states, like when the Mossi fought the Songhai, or they were people captured in specific raids on communities designated as kafir non-believers, living on the fringes of the powerful Islamic empires. Now, here is the quirky and complex tidbit. This old trade was heavily wrapped in legal and religious justifications. In the great Islamic empires to the north, like the Songhai, Islamic law, Maliki law, in this case, strictly forbade the enslavement of free Muslims. This created a critical, if often ignored, legal boundary. You couldn't just raid your Muslim neighbor, you had to have a religious justification jihad, or a political one, a formal war. This meant the supply of captives was, in a twisted way, regulated. It was a byproduct of politics and religion. It wasn't usually a free-for-all. Our Abliss knows this system. She participates in it. This is the uncomfortable truth. Where do you think those horses, the lifeblood of her cavalry, come from? She trades for them. And the northern merchants who sell the horses don't just want millet. They want captives. The human currency of the Sahel. Her own Soba will capture people from rival, non-Mossi groups in border skirmishes and trade them for the stallions they need to protect the Mossi. It's a brutal, pragmatic, and morally circular system. This is where the scholarly debate gets heated. Historians still argue vehemently over the demographic impact of this trans-Saharan trade. Was it a small, steady trickle, as some argue, dwarfed by the industrial scale of the later Atlantic trade? Or, as others contend, did this trickle, flowing for over a millennium, add up to a demographic catastrophe that rivaled the Atlantic one, profoundly shaping the Sahel long before a single European ship arrived? From where you're standing, you just know it's a fact of life. A brutal but predictable fact. And now, the Abliss, with her Mancala-trained mind, sees the new board. The new raider economy, the one from the south, is different. It flows south, not north. It's not going to the old familiar markets of the Sahara. It's going to the coast. The rules are gone. The new raiders aren't operating under Islamic law. They don't care about justifications. They aren't capturing prisoners of war. They are hunting. They are snatching farmers from fields, families from villages. They are attacking the Mossi themselves, who are neither kafir nor at war with them. The old boundaries are gone. The product has changed. In the old system, captives were traded for prestige goods, salt a necessity, fine cloth, and, most importantly, horses. The new system is fueled by one thing: guns. This is the dreadful equation she sees. The old system was war greater than captives, greater than horses, greater than stronger state. The new system is guns greater than captives, greater than more guns, greater than more captives. It's a feedback loop. It's a death spiral. It's an economy that doesn't just create captives as a byproduct. It is about creating captives. It is a machine designed to turn human beings into firearms, and those firearms are then used to acquire more human beings. This isn't a trade, it's a voracious, self-eating monster. The Abyss understands that this isn't a rival kingdom. This is a new parasitic business model, and it's pointing right at her people. The Abyss is now in a grim strategic corner. She understands the new gun slave cycle from the south. She understands the old horse slave cycle from the north. She is caught, quite literally, between two different but equally brutal economies, both of which see her people as a resource. This forces you, the observer, to ask a very uncomfortable question. You're watching her plan the defense of her kingdom. But what does defense actually mean? You're tempted to see this as a clear-cut story, the heroic Mossi queen defending her people from the evil Atlantic slave traders. But the 17th century Sahel is not a story of heroes and villains. It's a story of survivors. The mainstream historical fact is that the Mossi kingdoms were not peaceful isolationist victims. Far from it. As we've touched on, they had a long and well-documented history of being an aggressive, expansionist, and formidable military power. Their entire reputation was built on raiding. The 1329 sack of Timbuktu, a core event in their history, was a devastating raid deep into the Mali Empire. They were the regional menace, the ones who constantly harassed the wealthy Niger-Bend cities. Their relationship with the Songhai Empire was one of perpetual low-intensity warfare. They were famous for taking captives, taking cattle, and taking grain. This was how their state functioned. So, when these new raiders from the south appear, you're not watching a pacifist kingdom learn to fight. You're watching a professional boxer get challenged by a new opponent with a different and ugly style. This leads to the scholarly debate, and it's a profound one. Historians still argue whether the Mossi defense against the new wave of slave raiders was a moral stand for their people, as freedom or a pragmatic monopoly action. Think about it from the Abyss's perspective. These new raiders aren't just a moral outrage, they're competition. They are poaching on her territory. They are disrupting her markets, attacking her villages, and stealing her kingdom's primary resource, its population. Is she horrified that her people are being enslaved? Of course, but she's also, as a political leader, furious that an outside, illegitimate force is undermining her state's authority and its own brutal economic systems. She's not defending freedom, she's defending the Mossi state. She's protecting her people, the Mossi, from being taken by others. This brings us to the quirky, or rather the structurally grim tidbit. The entire Mossi social structure wasn't just good at war, it required it. The Nakams, the ruling class descended from Yanenga, were a military aristocracy. Their entire purpose, their identity, was tied to the horse, to combat, to bravery. A Soba gained prestige, wealth, and honor by fighting. This system needs a constant outlet. What happens to a professional warrior class in a time of total peace? They get restless, they bicker, they plot, they start civil wars. Therefore, the old raider economy, the seasonal, contained raids on non-Mossi neighbors to the north or west wasn't just an economic activity. It was a vital social and political pressure valve. It gave the Soba a job to do, a way to prove their worth, and, not coincidentally, a way to get the captives and cattle needed to buy the horses that secured their status. So, when our Abyss plans her defense, it's a two-pronged strategy. Block the south, she must, at all costs, stop the new gun-toting raiders. They are an existential threat that shreds the very fabric of the kingdom. Maintain the north, she must simultaneously keep her own cavalry funded, which means she, still needs horses, which means she still needs to pay for them, which means she probably can't afford to stop the old system entirely. She's not an abolitionist, she's a monarch. She is fighting to protect her people from being victims of the Atlantic trade, but she may have to continue to participate in the trans-Saharan trade just to survive. She's fighting one slave trade, quite possibly, by perpetuating another. This is the cold, brilliant, and morally shattering Mancala game she is playing. It's not about good versus evil, it's about who gets to stay on the board. And now, she's ready to make her first move. She has made her decision. The Mancala game is in motion, and she is sacrificing her first seeds to set up the board. The reports from her new Abyss-funded intelligence network, those very same Yara's merchants, and market women you saw her debriefing have just come in. A raiding party, about 30 strong, has been spotted. They are moving west of the main trade route, striking at the soft-targeted villages in the southern grasslands. They are greedy and they are slow. They already have a coffle of about 50 captives, and they have the fire sticks. The Mogo Naba, the king, is furious. His instinct is to send the entire Soba cavalry, a thundering wave of 1,000 horsemen, to crush them, but the abbess argues against it. You're in the tense, smoky audience hall when she makes her case. You will send 1,000 horses, she says, her voice quiet but carrying, and you will get back 500, and the raiders will be gone. She knows a frontal assault on muskets is a catastrophic waste of her most precious resource, the horses. Instead, she requests command of a single, smaller contingent, just 50 of the best Soba, led by her most trusted commander, a man named Gami. The king, wary but trusting his sister's or mother's shrewdness, agrees. You watch her give Gami his orders, not in the main hall, but in her private courtyard. She's not telling him where to fight, she's telling him how. This is her first gambit. Gami and his 50 riders find the raiders. The Soba are nervous. They've all heard the stories of the Thundersticks. The raiders, seeing the elite Mossi cavalry appear, form a rough line, their muskets ready. Gami's men do something baffling. They charge, but it's a weak, disorganized-looking charge. They whoop, they throw a few javelins from well out of range, and they wheel their horses around. The raiders are overconfident. Their leader, a man who has built his reputation on the terror of his new weapons, barks a laugh. He orders his men to fire a volley. The sound is deafening, a crack of thunder that echoes across the savannah. Smoke billows. A few horses rear, and one Soba falls, his arm shattered. This is the moment Gami's men, as per the abbess's exact instructions, do the unthinkable. They turn and they flee. It's not a fighting retreat, it's a rout, a full-in, panicked, cowardly sprint, their backs to the enemy. The raiders' leader, smelling blood, makes his fatal mistake. He sees the legendary Mossi cavalry, the terror of the Sahel, running from a single volley. He and his men have become invincible. After them, he screams, ordering his men to break line and give chase. They are so eager for more captives, the horses and the Soba themselves would be a massive prize that they run. Reloading their muskets as they go, their own formations dissolving in a triumphant, greedy mob. This is the mainstream historical fact of Sahelian warfare that our queen is exploiting. The feigned retreat, this was the classic tactic of the Mossi, the Songhai, the Malians, any horse-based army. They would break in disorder, tempting a disciplined infantry to break its formation in pursuit. And a broken formation, as any general knows, is a mob ready to be slaughtered. But the abbess has added a new, brilliant twist. The raiders are chasing Gami's men. They are fast, but the Soba are just a little faster. Gami is leading them. He's not just running from them, he's running to a specific place, a place the queen pointed to on a mental map she'd had drawn by the local guides. He's leading them into a bongoa-dry, shallow riverbed, flanked by dense, thorny acacia scrub and low, rocky hills. The raiders pour into the gully, their invincible muskets now a hindrance as they stumble over rocks and thorns. And then Gami Soba don't just stop, they split. 25 riders peel off to the left, 25 to the right, scrambling up the banks of the gully like spiders. The raiders are in the trap. And now, the quirky tidbit, a sound cuts through the chaos. It's not a horn, it's a drum. From a mile away from a high rock, one of the Abelis's own musicians, a master of the lunga, the talking drum, is watching. He has been beating a pursuit rhythm. Now, he beats the attack signal. The sound carries, and Gami's menand, the other men, the ones the raiders, never so hear it. Hidden in the acacia scrub, on both sides of the gully, were 200 Mossi foot soldiers, local militia, armed with spears, bows, and clubs. They were waiting. They rise from the earth. The raiders are now trapped in a gully, with their muskets mostly unloaded. And before they can reload, the Soba are back, charging down the slopes from both sides, no longer fleeing, but attacking, their spears low. The fight is over in 90 seconds. The captives are freed. The muskets are captured. This, however, brings up a classic scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the feigned retreats of Sahelian armies were truly pre-planned, complex maneuvers, or simply a brilliant way to rebrand a failed charge? Was Gammy's route a brilliant piece of acting, or was he genuinely retreating until he heard the drum signal and decided to give it another go? It's the historian's chicken and egg problem. But as you watch the freed captives celebrating and the Soba grimly collecting the captured muskets, you know the truth. This wasn't an accident. This was a Mancala move. This was the queen. She has won. Her first gambit worked. She's proven that tactics can beat technology, but she also knows this was a close Arun thing. She can't risk her Soba like that again. She needs to protect them. She needs to make them bulletproof. And she's looking at the quilted armor they wear, and she's wondering, what if? The victory is intoxicating. Gammy and his men are celebrated as heroes in the Ablis's court. The captured muskets, those dreaded fire sticks, are laid out on the ground, no longer terrifying, just inert, oily pieces of wood and metal. But as you watch the queen, the Abilis, you see she's not celebrating. She's examining the Soba, who was wounded. His arm is a mess, the bone shattered, but he's alive. The musket ball, fired from a distance, had lost some of its velocity. It punched through his shield, but was then caught in the thick padded armor he wore. It didn't stop the injury, but it stopped the death. Now, your attention is drawn to this armor. This is the mainstream historical fact of the day. The Lafidi, it's the standard Yusu protection for the Soba and their precious horses. You've seen it hanging in the compounds, and it looks, well, like a giant, puffy quilt. It's made of dozens of layers of cotton cloth, stuffed with raw ginned cotton, or sometimes kapok, and then stitched into a dense, heavy, and incredibly thick garment. The riders wear a long, sleeveless coat of it, and their horses are draped in a full-body barding of the same material, making them look like huge, colorful, lumbering beasts. It's hot, it's heavy, and it's wildly colorful, often dyed with bright geometric patterns in indigo, red, and yellow. It looks clumsy, it looks ceremonial, but it is lethal. Or rather, it's the opposite of lethal. It's the opposite of Lethal Lit's incredibly effective protection. Against the weapons of this world, anyway, an arrow, especially one with a barbed, non-armor-piercing head, gets lost in the layers. A javelin's point can't find purchase. A slashing cut from a sword is completely absorbed. It's the West African equivalent of a gambeson or a flak jacket. It is the technological counter to the dominant weapons of the savannah. And crucially, it's made from a resource the Mossi have in abundance: cotton. The Ablis is looking at this armor, a material she controls, a product of her weavers and farmers, and she's wondering, it slowed the musket ball. What if it was ... thicker? This brings us to a wildly quirky fringe theory about the Lifidi's origins. You and I, we see it as a logical military invention. But there's a different story, one you hear from the old men, the ones who listen to the earth priests, the Tengande. This theory claims the Lafidi wasn't invented by a Soba at all, but by a Tengande priest centuries ago. It wasn't originally stuffed with cotton, but with raw kapok, the fiber from the sacred silkatan tree. Why? Because kapok was believed to be spiritually pure, or empty. This meant it was perfect for absorbing Niamath, the dangerous spiritual energy, the life force or curse that a warrior at sea accumulates in battle, or that an enemy projects with his weapons. The armor, in this telling, wasn't designed to stop a physical spear. It was designed to spiritually disarm the man holding the spear. The fact that it also happened to be fantastic at stopping the actual physical point was just a happy set effect, one that the Soba military class quickly cooped it and standardized, swapping the sacred kapok for the more common and farmable cotton. You look at the armor again. Is it a flak jacket or a spiritual sponge? In this world, it's probably both. But this armor is also expensive. A full set for a man and his horse requires a massive amount of cotton, skilled labor from the weavers, a powerful guild, and rare dyes. This leads to the scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the Lafidi armor's prevalence was due to its genuine tactical effectiveness, or its immense cultural value as a status symbol. When a Soba rode into battle dressed like a Technicolor tank, was he doing it because it was the best protection available? Or was he doing it to show everyone he was a high-status noble, a Nakams rich enough to afford this incredible walking display of wealth? Was it a weapon of war, or was it a form of conspicuous consumption, a 17th century military parade float? The Ablis knows the answer. It's both. And she's a pragmatist. She doesn't care about the status right now. She cares about the protection. She's tapping the thick, blood-stained cotton on the Soba's arm. She's thinking she can make more of this. She can make it thicker. She can improve it. But to deploy it effectively, she needs to know where the raiders will be. She's beaten them once with a trap. To do it again, she needs to know the layout of the entire board. She needs more than just rumors. She needs a network. You're watching the Ablas in her court, and she's not just a queen or a general, she's a spy master. The victory against the raiders in the gully was a success, but it was reactive. She knows she can't win by setting traps one by one. She has to get ahead of the threat. She needs to know where they are now and where they will be tomorrow. The Yars merchants, the ones who travel the long-distance routes, are good for big-picture intelligence. They brought her the news of the coastal guns, but they are too slow, and their routes are too predictable to track the small, fast-moving, and secretive raiding parties. So, the Ablas turns to her other network, the one that everyone sees but no one notices. The one she, as the Ablas, controls as part of her portfolio. You're with her as she leaves her formal court and walks into the central market of Ouagadougou. This isn't the same as your last visit. She's not here as a ruler, but as a manager. This market, and all the smaller markets in her territories, are her domain. And the mainstream historical fact is that in much of West Africa, internal markets that trade in food, textiles, pottery, and local goods were overwhelmingly run and dominated by women. This was their sphere of economic power. You see them everywhere. Women selling shea butter, which they've processed themselves in large calabashes. Women sitting behind pyramids of bright red chilies and okra. Women haggling over indigitied cloth. These women are organized. They have their own hierarchies, their own leaders, a market queen or tindana, and their own rules. They are a guild, a corporation, and a social club, all in one. And they all answer, ultimately, to the Ablas. She protects their trade. They pay her taxes, often ink into a bowl of millet from every sack sold, a length of cloth from every loom, and they talk. This is her brilliant move. This is her network. She calls a meeting not with all of them, but with the leaders, the senior women who control the trade in salt, in grain, in pottery. She's not asking them to be spies. She's asking them to do what they do every day, collect information. Here is the quirky tidbit. The Ablas is weaponizing gossip. She is turning the mundane chatter of the marketplace into a sophisticated, real-time intelligence sugring system. She gives them specific instructions. She's not asking, "Have you seen any raiders?" She's asking, "Which villages didn't send their women to the market this week? What's the price of salt on the southern route? Is it high? That means the route is dangerous and the traders are scared. Have you heard any new songs from the griot in the western villages? What are they about? Fear. Strangers. Who is buying unusually large amounts of millet? A trading caravan, or a group of armed men hiding in the bush?" This is a data processing machine powered by sea butter and small talk. A potter from a village 30 miles south doesn't show up for her regular market day. To anyone else, it's nothing. To the Ablas's new network, it's a red flag. The local market queen reports it to the Ablas's agent. An investigation is launched. They find the village, or what's left of it. A raiding party did pass through 2 days ago. Now, the Ablas has a data point. She knows where the raiders were, and she knows which direction they're heading. She's no longer blind. This, of course, leads to the scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether these powerful female merchant networks operated as truly independent economic actors or were, in reality, an informal, coopted branch of the state. Were these market queens entrepreneurs building their own wealth? Or were they always, implicitly, an intelligence and tax collection arm for the royal court, specifically for the Ablas? From where you're standing, you see it's a perfect symbiosis. The Ablas uses her political power to protect the market routes, enforce contracts, and keep the Soba from taxing the merchants themselves. In return, the market women don't just pay her in millet, they pay her in information. It's a closed loop of power and data. This new system is terrifyingly effective. Within a week, she has a map in her head. She's tracking 3 separate raiding parties. She knows their approximate size, she knows they have muskets, and she knows their general area of operation. They think they are invisible, striking at isolated villages. They don't realize that every time they buy or steal a gourd of water, every time a village fails to send its pottery to market, a report is flowing back to the Ablas's court. She is playing Mancala with the entire kingdom. The raiders are the opponent's seeds. And her network of market women is showing her exactly where every single seed is at all times. They are no longer a bogeyman, a thunderstick in the dark. They are just men. And she knows, as a woman of logistics, that men, especially men with guns, have a critical vulnerability. They need to eat. You're watching the Abyss play her kingdom-wide game of Matala. Her new intelligence network, those chattering, all-seeing market women, is feeding her data points. A village went silent. A trade route is suddenly expensive. A group of strangers bought too much food, and that's when it clicks. You're in her court as she's reviewing these reports. She's not just looking for the raiders. She's looking for their supply line. They are a moving army, small and fast, but they have a massive vulnerability, the same one her own army has. They need to eat, and so do their captives. A long march south to the coast, with 50 or 100 unwilling people, requires a lot of food. This is where you realize the true nature of this kingdom. You've been focused on the horses, the armor, the Yanenga myth, but you've been missing the real power. Look around you. This isn't a kingdom of gold. The Mogo Naba isn't rich because of mines. The mainstream historical fact is that the Mossi states were agricultural powerhouses. The true wealth, the currency, the blood and bone of this entire society is millet and sorghum. These hardy, drought-resistant grains, which thrive in the dry Sahel, are everything. Your gaze shifts to the granaries. They are everywhere, the most prominent buildings in any compound besides the ruler's hut. They are not small pots. They are huge, bulbous, mud brick structures raised off the ground on stones to protect from termites, with a small opening at the top. This is the Mossi Bank. This is the treasury. This is the strategic reserve. The Abyss doesn't just control markets, she controls this, the millet surplus from her own vast estates, and the taxes she collects from all the other villages all flow into these granaries. And this surplus is what allows the entire Mossi state to exist. It's what feeds the Mogonabu's court. It's what feeds the blacksmiths, the weavers, the griots, and most critically, it's what feeds the Soba and their horses. A cavalryman is a full-time professional. He doesn't farm, he trains, he fights, he maintains his gear. He and his family are fed by the state, by the Abyss's granary. His horse, that precious imported vulnerable asset, is a voracious consumer of grain. The entire military machine you've been admiring runs on millet. This leads to the quirky and crucial tidbit, the millet calendar. The entire rhythm of Mossi life, from war to religion, is dictated by the agricultural cycle. The rainy season, roughly May to September, is for farming. Everyone works. You cannot, must not, fight. The ground is mud, the tsetse flies are at their worst, and you are busy growing the food that will let you survive the rest of the year. Warfare, the Soba's raids, the politics that is a dry season activity. It is what you do after the harvest is safely in the granaries. The raiders from the south don't respect this calendar. They are attacking during the harvest season or just after, when the granaries are full. They aren't just stealing people, they are stealing the fuel of the Mossi kingdom. They are sacking the granaries to feed themselves on their march. Every village they hit, they are not only taking its future, the people, but its past, the stored harvest. This clarifies the entire struggle. The cavalry wasn't just created to protect people as a moral good, it was created to protect the grain. The people and the grain are the same resource, the kingdom's lifeblood. This brings you to the core scholarly debate about the Mossi state. The Abyss, of course, knows the answer. It's both. The farmers pay the tax, and in return, she uses that tax to fund the cavalry that stops other people from stealing the rest of their grain, and their children. It's a protection racket, yes, but it's the best one on offer. And now, her Moncala brain sees the new move. The raiders are targeting the granaries. This is a mistake. A village is a soft, unpredictable target. A granary is a fixed, known high-value asset. She knows where every single important one is. She now has a new strategy. She's not just hunting raiders, she's guarding the food. She can use her market women network to predict which cluster of villages, full from the recent harvest, is the most tempting target. She can pre-deploy her Soba, not to charge in, but to protect the asset. She is turning her cavalry from a sword into a shield made of quilted cotton that she will place around the kingdom's beating millet-filled heart. This strategy is about to be put to the test. Her intelligence isn't just picking up the tracks of small 30-man raiding parties anymore. They've just gotten a report of a new, far more dangerous player. a name that makes even the Yars merchants nervous. The Ablis's new strategy, this millet shield of pre-deployed cavalry protecting the kingdom's granaries, is a brilliant, defensive, logistical masterpiece. It's designed to make raiding unprofitable, to starve the raiders out. But it was designed based on the threat she knew. Small, 30-man bands, slow, and reliant on surprise. Now, her intelligence network, that finely tuned machine of market women, Yars traders, and local reports, brings her a name, and this name changes everything. It's whispered in the market with a new kind of fear. Not the fear of the unknown firesticks, but the deep, cold dread of a known professional and utterly merciless quantity. The Zarma, if the Mossi are the immovable object, the Zarma are the unstoppable force. This is the mainstream historical fact you need to understand. The Zarma, also called Jerma, are not a new phenomenon. They are a powerful people from the Niger River Valley, closely related to the Songhai. For a century, they were part of the Great Songhai Empire, many of them serving as elite cavalry and governors. But then in 1591, a Moroccan army, armed with European cannons and muskets, crossed the Sahara and shattered the Songhai Empire at the Battle of Tundabi. The empire didn't just fall, it disintegrated. This event, which happened a few generations before your present, created a massive power vacuum. It was the Sahelian equivalent of the Roman Empire collapsing. And the Zarma were now unemployed, a massive, highly trained professional military class. With its own noble leaders and centuries of experience in larger-scale warfare, was suddenly freelance. The Zarma did not become farmers. They became the most feared mercenaries, state builders, and slave raiders in the Sahel. They were not small-time bandits. They were organized, led by aristocratic warrior chiefs called Zarmakoi, and they moved in large, disciplined bands, sometimes hundreds or even thousands strong. They were, in essence, a mobile, predatory state, a cavalry-based society that preyed on agriculturalists. They were the Vikings of the Sahel, and they specialized in swift, brutal, large-scale attacks for captives, whom they would trade north for more horses or south for more guns. This is the force that the Ablis's network has just identified. A band of 200 Zarma riders, led by a Zarmakoi named Doyuda, is moving south, parallel to the main trade route. They are not nibbling at the edges. They are aiming for the heart. They are coming for the rich, full granaries of the Ablis's own territories. This leads to the quirky and terrifying tidbit, the Zarma reputation for Z. This is a Zarma word that doesn't just mean bravery. It means a kind of reckless, performative, almost suicidal courage. Zarma warriors were famed for it. They would ride into battle with a terrifying, high-pitched shriek, the hi, and seek out the enemy's champion. But this Z also applied to their cruelty. They understood the business of terror. They knew that if you spare one village, you have to fight at the next. But if you are so legendarily brutal at the first village, the next 5 will simply abandon their homes and run, leaving their granaries and captives for you to take. Their brutality wasn't random. It was a calculated psychological weapon. This professional, ruthless force is what the Ablis is now facing, and it brings up the central scholarly debate about the Zarma themselves. Historians still argue whether the Zarma, in this chaotic post-Songhai period, should be characterized as destructive, stateless predators or as pragmatic state builders. When a Zarmakoi and his band conquered a region, were they just glorified raiders bleeding it dry? Or were they, in fact, creating a new, if brutal, political order? They would depose the local chiefs, install their own governor, and demand tribute grain and people. Of course, they were, in essence, running a protection racket that looked a lot like a government. Were they just raiders, or were they a new dynasty in the making? The Ablis doesn't care about the academic distinction. A raider who steals your millet is a problem. A Zarmakoi who steals your millet, kills your soba, and then takes over your village and starts collecting your taxes. That is an existential threat. The Zarma know the Mossi tactics. They are the Mossi tactics, but perfected, hardened by decades of fighting in the imperial chaos. They also have cavalry. They also have quilted leafety armor, and unlike the Ablis's men, they have also been trading for muskets. They are a hybrid nightmare, combining the best of the old warfare cavalry with the worst of the new firearms. This is no longer a Mancala game of setting traps. This is a hidden collision. The Ablis's millet shield strategy is about to be tested, not by a small band of amateurs, but by the most professional and dangerous enemy in the Sahel, and the report is specific. Doyuda and his 200 riders are moving toward the Kudugu region, the breadbasket of the kingdom, where the granaries are fullest. The queen's first real battle is about to begin. You are not in the Ablis's court for this. You are here. You're riding with the Soba, the contingent she has dispatched to Kudugu. And the air is not just dry, it's electric, thick with the coppery taste of fear. The Soba are not in their usual formation. The Ablis's new strategy is in play. They are not hiding in a gully, and they are not riding out to meet the enemy. They are deployed in a long, seemingly thin defensive line, dismounted in front of the main village. Their horses are just behind them in the shelter of the compound walls. Protected, they are, quite literally, a millet shield for the massive, bulbous granaries you can see just over their shoulders. They look like infantry, and they look nervous. Then you hear it. Not a drum, not a horn. It's a high-pitched, ululating shriek, the high, rolling across the savannah. It's the sound of the Zarma. It's the sound of their Z. They appear, 200 riders, a cloud of dust on the horizon that quickly resolves into a nightmare. They are not a mob. They are a professional army. Doyuda, their Zarmakoi, is at their head, his leafety armor covered in talismans and strips of colored leather. And, just as the report said, about 50 of his men in the front rank have muskets. The Zarma don't hesitate. They don't form a line. They don't wait for a signal. Their Z is a tactic. They charge. It's a terrifying hybrid attack. The mainstream historical fact you're witnessing is the combination of fire and shock tactics that destabilized the entire Sahel. The Zarma cavalry charge, and at about 80 yards, the front rank of musketeers pulls up, aims ... and fires. The crack of 50 muskets discharging at once is a physical blow, a single, deafening thunderclap. Smoke, thick and acrid, billows across the field. You see men fall. The Mossi line, the one of dismounted Soba, is hit. 2 men just drop. Another screams, clutching his chest. The leafety armor ... It's not enough. Not at this range. Not against 50 balls at once. This is the moment of crisis. This is where the Zarma Z is supposed to break the enemy's will. And as the Mossi line staggers, the rest of the Zarma cavalry, the ones with spears and javelins, charge through the smoke. They are coming, shrieking, right at the hole the muskets just blew in the Mossi defense. But the Ablis planned for this. A lunga drum, the talking drum, beats a frantic, staggered rhythm from the village roof. It's not a retreat signal. It's a disperse signal. The Mossi center, the men who were just shot at, do not run. They melt, they dive to the sides, clearing the center, opening a fatal, inviting channel. Right toward the granary. Doyuda, the Zarma commander, sees the Mossi line break. He sees the granary behind them. He screams in triumph, his Z confirmed, and leads his best men in a wedge straight into the trap. And then, the trap springs. This is the Queen's Mankala move. The Mossi Soba on the flanks, the ones the Zarma ignored, the ones who were still mounted and hidden just behind the edges of the village, had their orders. The drum beats again, and they move. You are with them. You are on a horse, and you are charging. But you are not charging at the Zarma. You are charging at their sides. From the left and the right, 2 contingents of Mossi Soba, 50 each, crash into the flanks of the overextended Zarma column. It's a perfect pincer movement, a double envelopment. The quirky and brutal tidbit of this battle is the sound. It's not the clang of steel on steel you'd imagine. The leafety armor muffles everything. It's a battle of thuds, of grunts, of horses screaming, of men stabbing and hacking at the quilted, unyielding cotton. And you realize, in this chaos, that the Soba are not just soldiers, they are a family. They are all Nakam's nobility. The man you're riding next to is your cousin. The commander is your uncle. You are fighting, quite literally, to protect your family's granary. This isn't abstract, it's personal. Doyuda and his Zarma are now trapped. The Mossi center, the men who had dispersed, are back on their feet, attacking the Zarma from the rear. The Zarma column, so lethally effective in a charge, is a chaotic, panicked mob hemmed in on 3 sides. This brings the scholarly debate to life. Historians still argue whether Sahelian battles were decided by massed tactical maneuvers, like the one you're seeing, or if they were, in fact, a series of ritualized individual duels between champions. You see both. You see the Ablis's brilliant flanking tactic working perfectly on a macro level. But you also see, in the center of the melee, Gami, the Mossi commander, find Doyuda, the Zarmakoi. The two men, covered in their quilted armor, are locked in a personal, desperate one-on-one fight, hacking at each other, ignoring the chaos. The battle is both a chess game and a boxing match, but the chess game wins. The Zarma, with their Z, turned against them, their courage becoming a fatal overextension. Break. Doyuda, his arm bleeding from Gami's sword, screams a retreat. The Zarma panic. They turn and flee, and the Mossi Sobatha, ones who are still mounted, cut them down. The skirmish, so brutal and so fast, is over. The field is littered with the dead, mostly Zarma. The granary is safe. The Ablis's strategy, mixing traditional tactics with a cold, new logistical intelligence, has worked. The Soba have beaten a superior, better-armed foe, not by being stronger, but by being smarter. But as you look at the captured muskets and the Mossi men who died from the first volley, you know this victory came at a terrible price. And it's a price that's about to get even more complicated. You're standing on the battlefield in Kudugu. The sun is setting, casting long, bloody shadows over the savannah. The air is thick with the smell of smoke, dust, and death. The Zarma are gone, scattered, leaving their dead behind. The Mossi Soba are grimly efficient. They are collecting the captured muskets, a huge prize. They are tending to their wounded. The millet in the granaries is safe. This, this is a victory. A major one. You watch the Ablis as she arrives from her nearby command post. She's not celebrating, she's doing math. She walks past the bodies of the Zarma raiders. She nods to Gami, her victorious commander. And then she stops, her face hardening. She's looking at a dead horse. One of her Soba's mounts, its quilted leafety soaked in blood, its leg shattered by a musket ball. You follow her gaze, and you see another and another. The victory cost them, not just in men, but in horses. You count at least a dozen dead Mossi stallions, the kingdom's most precious military asset, the core of its power. You're standing next to the Ablis, and you can almost hear the Moncala beads clicking in her head. She just lost 12 tanks, 12 irreplaceable, imported, phenomenally expensive pieces of military hardware. And in this moment, you are forced to confront the central, agonizing contradiction of this entire story. You are forced to confront the price of horses. The mainstream historical fact is that the Mossi kingdoms, for all their cavalry prowess, were a terrible place to raise horses. The tsetse fly, the carrier of sleeping sickness, thrived in the savannas and river valleys that made up their territory. While their small, tough local ponies had some resistance, the big, fast, powerful war horses, they relied on the barbs and dongaler. Crosses from the north had none. They were, as we've noted, constantly dying of disease, even when they weren't being shot by Zarma. This meant the Soba was not a self-sustaining force. It was a military machine with a built-in, constant, and massive rate of attrition. To simply exist, the Mossi cavalry needed a continuous, unbroken supply of fresh horses from the Setsri lands to the north. The Niger bend the markets of the Yar Sandula merchants, the heartland of the old Malian and Songhai empires, and those merchants, they didn't want millet. The Mossi had grain, but so did they. They didn't really want gold. The Mossi lands were not rich in it. What those northern merchants wanted, the primary currency they demanded for their priceless horses, was captives. This is the grim, unavoidable reality. To get the horses, the Ablis had to buy them, and the only currency she had, the only product her kingdom could export that the North truly valued, was people. This brings us to the quirky and horrifying tidbit, the exchange rate. You're in the Ablis's court a week later. A Yars merchant is there, a man with a regal.com face who has just brought a new string of 10 stallions south. He's here to trade, and the Ablis is negotiating, and you learn the math. A single, healthy, premium-off-its-life warhorse, a stallion proven to be fast and strong, is worth, on average, 15 able-bodied captives, sometimes 20 if the horse is truly exceptional. Let that sink in. 15 human beings. 15 men or women, captured, chained, and marched north across the Sahara. ... for one horse. The Ablis lost 12 horses in the Battle of Kudugu. You can do the math. She needs to purchase 12 replacements. That's 180 people. So, here's the scholarly debate that this reality hinges on. Historians still argue whether the Mossi participation in the trans-Saharan slave trade was a reluctant necessity for defense or a core, foundational pillar of their entire state economy. Were they, as one side argues, tragic figures? A kingdom forced into this brutal trade, capturing their non-Mossi neighbors simply to acquire the horses they had to have to defend their own people from far worse threats, like the Zarma or the Atlantic raiders. Was it a lesser of two evils choice? Or, as the other side contends, was the entire Mossi state built on this economy from the very beginning? Was the Nakam's aristocracy, the warrior class, created precisely to raid for captives, which they then used to buy the horses that were the symbol of their status? Was the defense of the kingdom just a convenient justification for a state whose primary business model was, and always had been, slave raiding for prestige? You're watching the Abyss. She just won a battle defending her people from being enslaved and marched south. And now, she is sitting in her court, calculating how many people she must enslave and march north. She gives a quiet, firm order to Gami. He is to take his SOBA ... and ride west. Not south, toward the Zarma. West, toward the lands of the Guernsey, a stateless, non-Mossi people. A traditional target. They are not a threat. They have no Zarmakoi. Gami nods. He takes the order. There is no moral crisis. There is no hesitation. This is the job. This is the price of horses. This is the cold, brutal, Mancala game of survival. To protect your kingdom, you must become the predator that your neighbors fear. The Abyss is fighting one slave trade by being a customer and a supplier for another. You're in the Abyss's court. The victory at Kutugu feels hollow. The elation has faded, replaced by the grim, cold reality of the ledger. 12 dead horses, that's a cost of 180 captives, give or take. A week later, Gami returns from his raid to the west, his men driving a coffle of 200 terrified Guernsey villagers. The price has been paid. The Yars merchant is summoned. The horrific exchange is made, and the Soba have their new mounts. The system works. The cycle continues. But the Abyss is not satisfied. You see her in a different part of the compound, far from the main court. You're in the smoky, roaring forge of the blacksmiths. She's not here to order spears. On a mat, laid out like a patient on a table, are the captured firearms, the thundersticks. She's holding one. It's a European-made flintlock musket, heavy, oily, and strangely cold. The kingdom's master smith, a man whose lineage has been forging the Soba's blades for centuries, is with her. He's mystified. This is the mainstream historical fact of the great divergence in technology. The Mossi smith is a master of forging. He can take a lump of iron, heat it, and hammer it into a spearhead or a sword blade of incredible quality, folding the metal, working it, understanding its soul. But this is a different magic. He cannot cast a perfectly uniform, hollow, and pressure-resistant iron barrel. He cannot replicate the tiny, intricate, spring-loaded clockwork of the firing mechanism. This isn't craftsmanship. It's a different alien science. The queen runs her hand along the smooth, hardwood stock. She sees the truth instantly. You cannot make this. It's a statement, not a question. The smith, shamed, shakes his head. No, Abyss. This is ... foreign. She has hit a technological wall. She cannot make the weapon. Her Mancala brain immediately pivots. If you can't make it, your strategy must now be twofold. 1. Acquire it. 2. Neutralize it first. Acquisition. She now has a new, dreadful strategic option. Those captives Gami just brought in, she used them to buy horses from the north. But she could just as easily have sent a different caravan, led by her Yars merchants, south. Down the forest paths, to the coast. To the same shadowy coastal intermediaries, the same pale men in their water houses, that the Zarma trade with. She could have traded those 200 captives for perhaps 100 muskets. She is now, truly, at the crossroads. Does she join the very gun-slave cycle that is threatening to destroy her? It's a terrifying escalation. The thought of equipping her Soba with these things ... it's tempting. But then she looks at her cavalry, her Soba. They are horsemen. Their entire identity, their training, their Z, is about the charge, the javelin, the spear. A man fumbling with powder, ball, and flint on the back of a panicked horse is not a Soba, he's a victim. So, she focuses on neutralization. She has to adapt her tactics permanently. The Lafetti armor is a gamble, not a guarantee. The feigned retreat worked once, but it won't work on a disciplined commander. she has to change how her cavalry fights. This leads to the quirky and brilliant new tactic she begins to drill into Gammy and his men. You watch them in the dusty fields, it's the smoke and scatter. She takes her new, small unit of foot soldiers, the ones she's given the captured muskets to, and has them fire. The Soba are now trained relentlessly to never, ever charge a line of smoking sticks hidden. The instant they see an enemy line form, the instant they see the smoke, they are to scatter. Not in a feigned rout, but in a disciplined lateral burst. They are to ride in wild zigzag patterns, making themselves impossible targets, and immediately charge the flanks and the rear of the enemy. She is retraining her army to treat the musket's reloading time, that agonizingly long 1 minute gap, the true moment of battle. She is, in essence, neutering the firearm. She is making its strength, its frontal shock value irrelevant. She is turning her heavy shock cavalry into a true light cavalry. A fluid, harassing, intelligent force designed to fight around the new technology, not through it. This very adaptation is the heart of a massive scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the acquisition of firearms by Sahelian states led to a true military revolution, or if it was merely a tactical-level import that did unfundamentally change the nature of their warfare. Was this a new age? Or was the Abyss just adding a new tool to her old toolbox? You're watching her, and you see the answer. It's a revolution, but not in the way the Zarma think. The Abyss is not going to try to beat the gun. She's going to beat the man holding the gun. She has adapted. She has a new tactic. And she has her intelligence network. But she is also curious. What do the other side, the Europeans, what do they know of her? She's heard rumors of a pale man, a traveler, who passed through the region. She wants his report. Your world is fast-forwarding. The strategies the Abyss put in place, the smoke and scatter, the millet shield, the market woman intelligence network have worked. They have become the state's military doctrine, but the pressure has not stopped. It's now the mid-18th century, perhaps 1750. The Atlantic trade is at its absolute horrific peak. The Zarma are still a threat. The guns are everywhere. You are in the court of a new Abyss, a descendant of the one who first faced the crisis. She is just as shrewd, just as powerful, and her intelligence network is now global. A Yars merchant, one whose trade routes now extend all the way to the coast, to the massive, terrifying stone castles of the Europeans, has brought her a prize. It's not gold, it's not a musket. It's a book, a small, leather-bound journal. Its pages brittle and covered in strange, spidery black marks. It's in French. It's the journal of a European traveler, an explorer, or perhaps a naturalist, who passed through the region a few years prior, observing the Yars merchant, a polyglot who speaks a half-dozen African languages, as well as the trade French of the coast, is translating. It is a slow, difficult process. He reads, his finger tracing the alien script. He writes, "The kingdom of the Mossi is remarkable. It is an island of pagan, naked." The merchant pauses, frowning. He means ... unclothed. In our way, ABLASS, an island of naked horsemen, who have, by some barbarian sorcery, he squints, by some stubborn and barbaric military structure, resisted the full conversion to the Prophet's law. The Abyss smiles thinly. The traveler is annoyed that the Mossi are not Muslim, like the empires to the north. This is the mainstream historical fact. These early European accounts, men like Mungo Park, René Caillie, and a dozen lesser-known French and English traders and explorers were penetrating the interior. Their journals, filled with a mix of genuine curiosity, wild inaccuracy, and overt colonial and racial bias, were the only source of information on these kingdoms for the outside world. And they all, almost universally, remarked on one thing: the cavalry. The merchant continues to read. The traveler describes a skirmish he witnessed, likely one very much like the battle at Kutugu. The Zarma raiders, themselves a formidable foe, fired a volley of their trade muskets. I believed the Mossi, who were on foot, would be annihilated. Instead, they vanished like smoke and reappeared on horseback. On the flanks, it was a maneuver of the merchant struggles, of a speed and precision I have not seen, even in a French drilling yard. This is the grudging respect. The European cannot believe that these naked savages are executing a complex combat arms maneuver. He's insulted by their tactical brilliance. Now for the quirky tidbit, The traveler tries to describe the leafety, the quilted cotton armor. The Yars merchant starts to laugh as he translates. The SOBA ... their horsemen ... are not men at all, but monsters. They are shapeless, like ... like he's truly struggling. Like a giant's bed quilt, dyed in colors that offend the eye and stuffed with cotton. They ride horses, similarly dressed, so that the entire affair looks not like a cavalry, but like a parade of ... angry pillows. Angry pillows, the abbess repeats, savoring the absurdity. The European is so blinded by his own aesthetics that he can't understand what he's seeing. He sees a ridiculous, clumsy costume. The abbess sees a technology that works, a flak jacket that stops arrows, and, as he just noted, allows a man to survive a battle. The traveler's tone, however, gets darker. He begins to analyze. He measures the width of the river. He notes the price of millet in the market. He estimates the number of soba in the capital. He writes down the name of the abbess, and here is the scholarly debate that this journal represents. Historians still argue whether these early European accounts are valuable ethnographic records or simply colonial reconnaissance, dressed up as exploration. Was this man a scientist, a curious adventurer, or was he a spy? Was he Mungo Park, the explorer, or was he a vanguard agent, mapping the kingdom's military strength, its economic resources, and its political structure? For the French or British officers who would follow him, a generation later, with cannons and rifles, the abbess stops smiling. She listens to the translation of the traveler's cold, calculating assessment of her kingdom's strength. She's been focused on the Zarma, the raiders from the south. She's been managing the old trade to the north. But this book, ... this is a new enemy. An enemy that writes things down. An enemy that analyzes from a distance and disrespects you even as it grudgingly admires your tactics. She realizes the board is even bigger than she thought, and she needs to know everything about this new player. But first, she needs to ensure her own house is in order. She needs to be sure in this new, complex world that her own traditions, her own spiritual foundations, are secure. That cold, spidery script in the Frenchman's journal has changed the atmosphere in the court. The Zarma are a known physical threat. The raiders from the south are a persistent economic threat. But this is a conceptual threat. It's the threat of being known, of being cataloged, of being reduced to a problem for a foreign power to solve. You see, the abbess become more insular. Her public court is still busy the millet ledgers, the market woman reports, the soba commanders. But at night, you follow her to a different part of the compound, a place the French traveler, for all his measuring, could never have seen. There are no guards here, no soba in their angry pillow armor. She is walking alone to a simple, unadorned hut at the edge of the royal compound. This is the dwelling of the Tengandi, the priest of the earth. This is the mainstream historical fact that underpins the entire Mossi kingdom, the secret to its stability, the thing Yananga herself had to acknowledge. The power structure is dual. There isn't one ruler, there are two. The Mogo Naba and the abbess, as part of the Nakam's ruling class, is the master of the people. He owns you. He can tax you, conscript you, send you to war. He controls the administration, the cavalry, the state, but the Tengande, the earth priest, is the master of the land. He owns the ground you walk on. He is a descendant of the Bisa, the original people who lived here before Yananga and her stallion ever arrived. He is Rial, the elephant hunter, in ritual form. This means the abbess, for all her power, cannot do anything, plant a new field, build a new wall, and especially not wage a war without the Tengande's permission. To spill blood on the earth without the earth's blessing is to invite disaster, drought, plague, famine. The Soba might fight for the queen, but they will not ride if the Tengandi has not blessed the war. The abbess is here for that blessing. She's not just a general, she's a politician. She's here to perform the ritual that binds the Nakams, the riders, to the Tengabisi, the people of the soil. She ducks into the low, smoky hut. The Tengandi is an old man, his skin like dry parchment. He wears no gold, no fine cloth. He is the antithesis of royal power. The queen, the second most powerful person in the kingdom, sits on a simple stool, lower than the priest. She is here as a petitioner. She explains her new strategy. Not the smoke and scatter, but the next one. The big one. A preemptive campaign against a Zarma stronghold she's identified. It will be a major, bloody undertaking. She needs to know, will the earth accept this? The Tengandi nods. He begins the ritual. And here is the quirky, and to you, baffling tidbit. This isn't just prayer, it's divination. The Tengandi leads her to a pit behind his hut, a dark Walladan area. You hear a low hissing. He sacrifices a chicken, spilling its blood on the dusty ground. And then, he brings out the oracle. It's a python, a massive, thick-bodied snake. Its scales gleaming with an oily geometric pattern in the moonlight. This is the sacred python, the voice of the earth itself. The priest throws down a handful of cowrie shells and traces a pattern in the spilled blood. He asks the question, and they both watch the snake. The python moves. It slithers across the ground, its head weaving. Does it move toward the shells? Does it cross the bloodline to the left or the right? Does it coil, or does it move toward the obelisk? The Tengandi watches, his eyes half closed, his lips moving in a silent chant. He is reading the snake. After a long 5-minute silence, the snake settles, coiling on top of the sacrificed chicken. The Tengandi lets out a long breath. The earth accepts the blood, he says, but the cost will be high. The snake has eaten the sacrifice, but it looks to the west. Your danger is not just the Zarma, it is in your own house. The abbess nods, her face grim. She has her answer. This brings you to the core scholarly debate about this entire system. Historians still argue whether these spiritual political rituals were genuine acts of faith that dictated state policy, or were, in fact, sophisticated political theater. Was the abbess truly asking the python for permission? Or was this a masterpiece of political maneuvering? Think about it. She, the Nakam's ruler, comes to the Tengandi priest. She publicly humbles herself before him. She gives him the power to, theoretically, veto her entire military campaign. By doing this, she validates his authority. She honors the ancient pact of Yanenga, and she binds him to her. If the python agrees, and perhaps the Tengandi knows which way the political wind is blowing, he is now invested in her success. His spiritual authority is now staked on her victory. She hasn't just gotten permission, she has secured the buy-in of the single most powerful social and religious force in the kingdom, a force that is not her family. You're watching her walk back to her court, her shoulders set. It doesn't matter if it was faith or theater. It worked. The state is unified. The spiritual niyama of the kingdom is aligned. The cavalry will ride with the confidence that the earth itself is on their side, and she's glad for it. Because the Tengande's warning danger in your own house has just been confirmed by a breathless messenger waiting for her at her door. The threat isn't just the Zarma, or the raiders, or the French. It's her cousin, a rival prince, who thinks he should be in charge and has just been seen in a secret meeting with Zarma mercenaries. You're back in the abbess's court, the moonlight casting sharp, cold shadows. The Tengande's words are still hanging in the air, a spiritual checkmate ringing in your ears, danger in your own house. And just as that prophecy settles, a man stumbles into the court. He's not a soba, he's not a merchant, he's one of the abbess's personal servants, a man who oversees her private granaries, and he's terrified. He gasps out his report. Prince Kangu the Mogo, Nabu's ambitious cousin, a man you've seen strutting around the compound with a permanent arrogant smirk, has been seen. Not just seen, but seen in a secret late-night meeting in a millet field, 3 miles outside the walls. His meeting was with a small, heavily armed group. The man recognized their markings and their high-pitched T, called they were Zarma. The Tengande's warning wasn't a metaphor. It was a literal, immediate truth. You have to understand why this is so much worse than a simple raid. This is a crisis of the entire Mossi political structure. The mainstream historical fact is that Mossi succession is a nightmare. It is not, as you might expect, primogeniture, where the eldest son calmly inherits. When a Mogo Naba, a king, dies, the throne is open. It's a violent, lateral free-for-all, a brutal winner-take-all contest. His brothers, his cousins, his uncles, any male Nakums with a legitimate blood link, and, more importantly, a cavalry and a will to use it, can make a play for the throne. This system creates a state of constant, simmering, low-grade civil war. Every ambitious prince is just one good crisis away from trying to seize power. Prince Kango is that man. He's a modernist. He looks at the abbess's millet shield strategy and sees weakness. He sees her loyalty to the old ways, the Tengandi, the millet economy. the northern trade for horses as sentimental and obsolete. He's been tempted. The coastal traders, the ones who pay in guns and brandy and European cloth, have reached him. His plan, which the Ablis now sees in its full horrific detail, is simple. He's hired the Zarma. He will use them and their muskets to help him seize the throne. He'll ambush and kill Gami and the Ablis's loyal Soba. And once he is Mogonaba, he will open the gates. He will fully join the gun-slave cycle. He will turn the Mossi kingdom into a massive, efficient Statoran machine for capturing people and selling them south. He's not just a trader, he's a business rival, and he's attempting a hostile takeover. Here's the quirky and frankly evil tidbit: his sabotage. The servants' report gets worse. Kango wasn't just meeting the Zarma, he was paying them, but he didn't have his own treasury. So he was paying them with her millet. He'd been using his royal authority to order her granary keepers to move thousands of pounds of millet under the cover of darkness from her main protected granaries to a series of small, fake, unprotected granaries out in the bush. This wasn't just theft, it was a trap. He was creating a trail of breadcrumbs. He knew her intelligence network would spot this unauthorized grain movement. He knew she would think it was a new Zarma band, and she'd send Gami and the Soba to protect it. He was luring her entire cavalry into an ambush where a combined force of his own men and the Zarma, armed with muskets, would be waiting. He's using her own brilliant logistical strategy against her. This is the system in action, and it brings up the scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether these frequent brutal succession disputes were a fatal flaw that structurally weakened the Mossi states and made them vulnerable, or if they were, in fact, a Darwinian mechanism that ensured only the most ruthless, intelligent, and capable leaders could rise to the top. Was this chaos a bug, or was it a feature that kept the kingdom's leadership sharp? You're watching the Ablis, and you can see she doesn't have time for theory. She has a traitor in her house and an army at her gate. She has to solve both right now. She can't send the Soba. They'd be riding into the trap. She can't tell the Mogonaba Kango is his cousin, and a public accusation would start a civil war inside the compound walls before the Zarma even arrived. She has to use her other power, the soft power, the economic power. She doesn't raise the alarm. She doesn't send a single soldier. She looks at her chief Yars merchant, the man whose loyalty is built on decades of her family's protection of his trade routes. She gives him a single, quiet order. 30 minutes later, Prince Kango is arrested, not by the Soba as a traitor. He's arrested in his own hut by the Yarsa Merchant Guild, the Tindana Market Queens, and the Tengundi priest. They are not arresting him for treason. They are publicly charging him with blasphemy and theft. He stole from the Ablis's sacred granaries, and he broke the pact with the Tengande by consorting with foreign blood-soaked men. It's a political masterstroke. She's taken him off the board, not with a spear, but with a social and economic coalition that he can't fight. She has her traitor. He is bound and gagged in a grain hut. She has averted the civil war. But her Mancala game has just been kicked over. The Zarma are still out there. They're waiting at the ambush site, and when Kango doesn't show up, they're not just going to go home. They're going to be furious. And they're going to come for the one place they know holds all the wealth, the capital itself. The Zarma are coming. The trap Prince Kango set for her has snapped shut on him, but the bait, the promise of her millet, and the fury of a double-cross is still active. The Zarma are furious, betrayed, and they are now riding on the capital itself. Ouagadougou, you're in the Ablis's court. The tension is a low, vibrating hum. Every Soba is on duty, every courier is running, and you, you find yourself looking for the walls. You stand on the slight rise where the Mogonabu's palace compound begins, and you look out over the capital, and you see nothing. No, that's not right. You see everything. You see a vast, sprawling, chaotic city. A city of thousands of round mud brick huts, of interconnected family compounds with their own high private walls, of winding, dusty, unpaved alleyways that look like a spider's web. You see the massive open central market, now empty. You see the compounds of the Yars merchants, the blacksmiths, the weavers. What you do not see is a wall. There is no great encircling stone fortification. There is no moat. There are no gates, no battlements, no watchtowers. This, you realize, with a jolt, is the mainstream historical fact of the Mossi capital. And indeed, many Sahelian cities, they were open cities, defended not by static stone, but by mobile cavalry. This is the Ablis's strategy in physical form. A stone wall, to a soba, is a prison. A wall is a come here and besiege us sign. It forces you to huddle inside while your enemy burns the millet fields outside. A wall means you've already lost the battle of maneuver. The Mossi kingdom is not a fortress, it's a swarm. Its defense is its offense. Its defense is the soba, the cavalry, the reputation, the Ablis's will. The Zarma are coming, and the Ablis is not ordering men to the walls. She's ordering Gami and his soba to the central parade ground. They are mounted, they are fed, they are resting in the shade. Their liffity armor hanging nearby, their horses calmly drinking from the troughs inside the city. They are not preparing for a siege, they are preparing for a sally. And what are they defending? The Waidanaba, the Mogo Neba's palace. This isn't a European castle. It's an immense, labyrinthine, sprawling compound, a city with an city, covering acres and acres, made entirely of reddish-brown mud brick. It's a maze of courtyards, audience halls, private chambers, and granaries, all connected by narrow, roofed passages. This brings you to the quirky tidbit about the capital's true defense. The power of Ouagadougou isn't in its physical structure, but in its ritual one. At the center of this maze lives the Mogo Naba, the king, and he is less a man, more a god. He is the descendant of Yanenga. His power is so immense that he is forbidden from the moment of his enthronement from ever looking a stranger, a commoner, directly in the face. He is veiled. His feet, in some rituals, are not allowed to touch the bare earth, lest his sacred power burn it. He is a divine ritual, invisible center of power. This is the fortress of Ouagadougou. It's a city built on the idea that its king is so sacred that to even approach him with Ilintin is to court cosmic disaster. But the Zarma are not Mossi. They don't care about the Mogo Nabu's sacred feet. They don't care about the Tengande's earth. They're mercenaries. They're here for the millet, and they know it's all stored right here. This leads to the central scholarly debate about this entire setup. Historians still argue whether these open Sahelian capitals were a sign of supreme military confidence or a critical, unsolved defensive vulnerability. Was the lack of walls a Chosa declaration that our cavalry is our wall? We fear no one. Was it a pragmatic move, recognizing that in this vast savanna, a wall is useless? Or was it, as some argue, a fatal flaw? A sign that these kingdoms, for all their cavalry prowess, had never truly figured out how to defend their own centers of government from a new, disciplined, musket-armed infantry. The Zarma commander, Doyuda, and his 200 riders, plus the men he brought for Kango's ambush, arrive. They crest the same rise you're standing on, and they stop. They see what you see, an open, sprawling, quiet city. No walls to breach, no gates to burn. But they also see, in the central market square, 1,000 soba on horseback, calmly waiting. Not a rabble, but a disciplined, armored, and fed army. At home, Ready Doyuda is a professional. He's not a fool. He can't besiege a city with no walls. The soba would just ride out and cut him to pieces from all sides. He can't storm the city. That mud brick maze of compounds would swallow his army, turning every alley into a death trap, while the main cavalry force hit him from the rear. He can't lure them out. They are out. They are, in fact, daring him to come in. He looks at the city. He looks at the silent, waiting, endless lines of angry pillows on their horses. He looks at the palace, a mud brick mountain that would take a week to pick apart, all while the soba nipped at his flanks. This is the fortress. The Ablis has built a fortress of reputation. The city's defense is the knowledge that the Mossi cavalry is the baddest thing on the savannah. And they are right there. Doyuda, screaming in pure, impotent fury at Kango's betrayal. At the Ablis's perfect defense, at this impossible city, wheels his horse. His Z is broken. He and his men turn, and they ride away. They came for millet and found a nightmare. The Ablis watches them go. She hasn't lost a single man. She hasn't even used her smoke and scatter tactic. She has one. And now, she's not just a defender. She's a victor. Her power is absolute. Her strategies are proven. And a ruler with that much leverage, that much reputation, can now do something even more powerful than fighting. She can make peace, on her own terms. The Zarma are gone. Prince Kango is in a grain hut, his political career over, his life likely forfeit to the Tengande's justice and the Ablasse ... She is ascendant. You're in her court, and the vibe is completely different. The fear is gone, replaced by a cold, humming, undeniable authority. She has one. She has faced an internal coup, a traitor, and the most feared mercenaries in the Sahel, and she has defeated them all without losing a single man in the final confrontation. Her Mancala game was flawless. Her reputation is now a weapon, arguably more powerful than her cavalry. And like any good general, she is going to use this new weapon immediately. While it's still hot, she's not just a defender, she's a state builder. She knows she's solved the Mossi problem, but she hasn't solved the regional one. The Zarma are still out there. The southern raiders are still nibbling at the borders. Her kingdom is an island of stability, which just makes it a more tempting target. She needs to expand her perimeter. She needs a buffer zone, so she calls for a diplomatic mission. This is the mainstream historical fact of pre-colonial African geopolitics. Diplomacy was inseparable from military power. You didn't just ask for an alliance, you demonstrated why it was a good idea to ally with you, and a very bad idea not to. The Obelisk is sending an emissary to a neighboring kingdom to the south, one of the smaller Gurunzi states. This state is not a threat, but it's a victim. It's one of the soft targets that has been paying tribute to the Zarma, a classic protection racket. The Zarma took their millet and iron in exchange for not burning their villages. The Obelisk is about to make them a new offer, and her emissary, she sends Gami, her most trusted commander. And with him, she sends 500 Soba. You ride with them, but this is not a war party. This is ... something else. This is the quirky and astonishing tidbit. This is peacocking as foreign policy. The Soba are not in their stained functional battle leafity. They are wearing their parade armor. This is the quilted cotton armor, but elevated to an art form. It's blindingly colorful, dyed in impossible shades of indigo and madder red. It's covered, encrusted, with talismans, leather pouches, strips of silver, polished mirrors that catch the sun, and thousands upon thousands of rattling cowrie shells, the currency of the kingdom. Their horses are similarly draped plumes on their heads. It's the most intimidating, ostentatious, and frankly loud thing you have ever seen. It's not a threat, it's a statement of wealth. It says, we have so much surplus, so much power, that we can afford to dress 500 tanks in jewelry. We are that rich. We are that secure. Gami and his 500 angry pillows ride into the Gurunsi king's dusty, small, and very much unwalled capital. They don't draw their swords, they just ... sit there in his main courtyard. 500 living, breathing, rattling, mirror-flashing symbols of Mossi power. The Gurunsi king, understandably, is terrified. Gami dismounts. He's not here to threaten. He's here to deliver the Obelisk's message, and the message is simple. You have been paying the Zarma, Gami says, his voice calm. And they did not protect you. They took your grain, and the southern raiders still came and took your children. The Obelisk of Ouagadougou, my queen, the one who broke Doyuda, and the Zarma, now makes you this offer. You will no longer pay the Zarma, you will now pay her. You will pay her half what you paid them. Half the millet, half the iron, and in return, we will be your wall. When the raiders come, you will send a drum, and we will come, and we will be the ones to fight. This brings the whole encounter to the sharp point of the scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether these alliances between the Mossi and their smaller, non-Mossi neighbors were truly mutual defense pacts, or simply a more polite, formalized system of vassalage and tributary extortion. Was this a generous offer of protection? A Mossi doctrine for the whole region? Or was the Obelisk just replacing the Zarma's protection racket with her own? Is this diplomacy? Or is this the most polite, you're under new management shakedown in history? The Gurunsi king looks at Gami. He looks at the 500 Soba, who are probably complaining about the heat, but look like gods. He thinks about the Zarma, who took his millet and also let his villages burn. He thinks about this new offer, half the price, and real protection from the army that beat the Zarma. It's the easiest decision of his life. He agrees. The Obelisk has done it. She has used her military victory and the reputation it earned her to build her buffer zone. She has expanded her millet shield without firing a shot. She's now getting millet and iron from a new tributary state, further securing her own economy, all in exchange for a promise of protection. She has turned her tactical genius into a sustainable, long-term geopolitical system. She is at the absolute zenith of her power. The kingdom is secure. The granaries are full. The borders are protected, and her neighbors are paying her for the privilege. And it's a good thing, too. Because that French journal, that was a sign. The Zarma were the old world's threat. The new world's threat is still coming. The Abbess is at the peak of her power. The system she and her mothers before her built is a masterpiece. It's now the late 19th century. You're walking through the same capital, Ouagadougou. It's bigger, richer, more confident. The Soba are still the terror of the region. The Millet Shield holds the tributary states, like the Gurunsi, pay their taxes. They're still a threat, but a managed one. The gun-slave cycle to the south is a horror, but the Mossi kingdom is a bulwark against it, secure in its own brutal, pragmatic, northern-facing economy. The Abbess of this generation. She is presiding over a golden age. The kingdom is safe. And then, the French shadow, the one you glimpsed in that traveler's journal, stops being a shadow. It becomes a person. He arrives, not a griotte, not a Yars merchant, not a Zarma raider. He is a European, a Frenchman. His name, perhaps, is Louis-Gustave Binger, or Parfois Louis Monteil. He arrives with a small contingent of Senegalese, Tiralus riflemen, and a lot of ... paper. This isn't a raid, it's an expedition. And he doesn't want millet, he doesn't want captives. He wants a meeting. You are in the great audience hall of the Mogonaba. The Abbess is there, veiled in her place of power. The entire court is assembled, and this lone sunburnt man, in a strange, impractical uniform, is requesting that the Mogonaba sign a piece of paper, a treaty. This is the mainstream historical fact of the era, the scramble for Africa. It's the 1880s. The European powers Britain, Germany, and especially here France have decided, in faraway meetings in Berlin, to carve up the entire continent. This isn't a trade dispute, it's a new global geopolitical reality. The French are moving inland from their bases in Senegal to connect their colonial holdings, and the Mossi kingdoms, the last great independent pre-colonial state in the region, are sitting right in the middle of their map. The Frenchman, through a translator, explains that this treaty is for the Mossi's protection. The Mogonaba famously gives his reply. It's the quirky, legendary tidbit of this entire encounter. The Mogonebit was Mogoneba Wab Galissens, and then says, I know the whites wish to kill me in order to take my country, and yet you claim they wish to help me organize my country. But I find my country good, just as it is. I have no need of them. I know what I need and what I want. Go tell the white man that I shall never be his. He will never put his foot here. It's the most profound, direct, and powerful no in West African history. He's not playing Mancala, he's just ... refusing. But the Frenchman just smiles. He's not here to negotiate, he's here to deliver the terms. He packs his paper, he leaves, and the Abbess, the Mancala player, feels a cold dread that she has never felt before. The Yars merchant, the one who translated, leans in and whispers, he wasn't alone, Abbess. He had 10 men. They didn't have muskets, they had rifles. They can fire ... 15 times without reloading. And they had a magic pot on a tripod, the one they call the Maxim. It fires 1,000 times in a minute. The entire tactical smoke and scatter system, the Lafite Arma, the Soba charge, it's all useless. It's a joke. You can't flank a machine gun. You can't feign retreat from a bullet that travels faster than sound. The angry pillows of quilted cotton will not stop a modern .303 caliber rifle round. The Abbess's entire worldview, the one built on cavalry, millet, and reputation, has just been rendered obsolete. The geopolitical map hasn't just changed, it's been erased. A new map, drawn in Berlin, is being placed on top of it. This leads to the tragic scholarly debate of the end. Historians still argue whether the Mossi's famed military resistance to the French, which happened a few years later, was a unified nationalist stand for independence, or the last desperate act of a doomed noble class trying to preserve its own feudal power. When the French do come back, this time with an army, the Vumatunen mission, one of the most brutal in colonial history, who is it that fights? It's the Soba, the Nakams, the cavalry. Are they fighting for the Mossi people, or are they fighting for their own privilege? Are they fighting for their right to be the ones who collect the taxes, who raid the Gurinsi, who buy the horses? Are they fighting for their system? You watch the Abbess. She knows the Frenchman's rifle has just destroyed the Soba's entire purpose. And she knows that when the French do take over, they won't need a local, independent queen mother who controls the millet and the markets. They will install their own administrators. They will collect their own taxes. The Zarma were a rival. The Southern raiders were parasites. The French are a replacement. The shadow has arrived, and it's not here to raid. It's here to stay. The game is over. You are no longer in the 19th century. The dust of the Vulichinoy mission, the smell of cordite and high-velocity rifles, has settled. You're here, now. You're in a university library, let's say. It's quiet. It smells like old paper and floor wax. You're looking at a modern political map of West Africa, and right there in the middle of it is Burkina Faso. And if you were to fly to Ouagadougou today, you could go to the Mogo Nuba's palace, and you would find him there, the descendant of Yeninga. He holds no official political power in the modern republic, but his cultural and social authority is immense. The French, you see, didn't destroy the kingdom, not really. After the initial brutal conquest, they found the Mossi state, the Ablaces state, too complex and too resilient to just erase. So they couped it. They ruled through the Mogo Naba. They left the entire ritual and social structure, including the Ablaces court and the Tengande's authority, intact. They just ... siphoned the taxes off the top. And this is the mainstream historical fact. The Mossi kingdoms survived. The Asante Empire, crushed and exiled. The kingdom of Dahomey, shattered. The Sokoto Caliphate, subdued. But the Mossi, for all their military defeat, endured as a coherent, unbroken cultural entity, their royal line still sitting on the same land. And this brings you, the student of history, to the final, great, contested question. Why? Why did this kingdom, this dynasty, this system built by our Ablas and her ancestors, survive the 19th century meat grinder that consumed everyone else? You're looking at the book, and you see the two opposing arguments. This is the central scholarly debate. Was it the Ablaces' legacy? Was it her system, the flexible tactics, the robust millet economy, the unified spiritual political state, the hard target reputation that made the Mossi kingdom uniquely indigestible to a colonial power? Or was it all just dumb luck? You look at side A, the Ablaces' legacy argument. This side argues that the French, after the first bloody battles, realized what they were facing. This wasn't a centralized, top-heavy empire. This was the millet shield. To conquer the Mossi, you didn't just take the capital. The capital was open. You had to conquer every single village, each with its own granary, its own local soba contingent, and its own loyalty to a local chief who was also loyal to the Ablas. It was a decentralized, resilient, guerrilla fighter's nightmare. The French, brilliant military pragmatists, looked at the cost in bullets and men to pacify this entire, vast, stubborn kingdom, and they simply said no. It was too expensive. The Ablaces' strategy, in the end, made the kingdom too costly to break. Then you look at side B, the geographic isolation argument. This side is more cynical. It argues that the Ablaces' tactics, the soba, none of it mattered. It was all a romantic sideshow. The real reason the Mossi survived is ... they were poor. This is the quirky and deeply unromantic tidbit. In 19th century colonial terms, the Mossi kingdoms were worthless. Look at the map. They're landlocked, hundreds of miles from the coast. They had no gold mines, like the Asante. They had no palm oil, no rubber, no diamonds. All they had ... was millet. And people, the French didn't want a millet kingdom. They had no interest in it, except as a strategic blank space on the map. They took it purely to connect their valuable colony in Senegal to their other colony in Niger, and to make sure the British, who were pushing up from Ghana, didn't get it first. So, this argument says the French conquest was a light-touch affair despite the Victories mission's brutality, because they didn't care. They just needed to plant a flag, secure the Mogo Nabu's signature on a treaty which he'd already refused, and move on. They left the system intact because it was easier, and there was no profit in replacing it. So, what's the answer? Was it her brilliant resistance, or was it their cynical indifference? You close the book. You realize the truth is, as always, in the middle. The Ablaces' system, her millet shield, her hard target reputation, that is what made the kingdom low value. It was her strategies that made the cost-benefit analysis so unattractive she made her kingdom a porcupine. The French could have eaten it, but why bother? It was all spikes, and no meat. Her legacy wasn't victory, her legacy was survival. She didn't beat the French. She made her kingdom, her people, her heritage. Too much trouble to kill. And in the face of the 19th century industrial colonial machine, that is, perhaps, the only victory that was ever possible, you lean back, the smell of old paper filling your nose. You've seen her fight, seen her think, seen her play the Mancala game of her life. And now, all that's left is to listen to the echo. You're in that library, the quiet hum of the building's ventilation, replacing the sound of the lunga drum. You close the heavy history book. The story is over. The last ride of the Soba, it didn't end in a glorious final charge against the French. It ended, as all old systems do, with a new, less romantic, and far more bureaucratic system being written on top of it. The Soba's last true ride was a slow, quiet ride into the pages of the very book you're now closing. But the echo, you can still hear it. The mainstream historical fact of this entire story is the survival. The Mossi kingdoms, as a cultural and political entity, are still there. The Mogo Naba of Ouagadougou, the direct descendant of Yanenga and Ouedraogo, still holds court. He is a figure of immense moral and traditional authority in the modern Republic of Burkina Faso. This is the ultimate legacy of the Obelisk. She didn't win a war in the sense we understand. She won the long game. She played Mancala for 400 years, and when the board was finally taken away by the French, she had more seeds, more house, than any other player. Her tactics, the millet shield, the intelligence network of market women, the smoke and scatter, the spiritual alliance with the Tengendial combined to create a state that was simply too much trouble. It was a porcupine. It was a stubborn, decentralized, self-sufficient, spiritually unified, and militarily annoying kingdom. And that, in the brutal calculus of colonialism, was the winning formula. She didn't make her kingdom invincible. She made it unprofitable to destroy. That is the cold, brilliant, and enduring legacy of her strategy. And here is the quirky and truly wonderful tidbit of that survival. If you go to Ouagadougou today, you can, on certain days, witness the Nabaskskango. It's a weekly ritual performed every Friday just after dawn that has been happening for centuries. It's a short, 15-minute piece of political theater performed at the Mogo Neba's palace. In it, the Neba's chiefs arrive on horseback in their old grand regalia and symbolically threaten him, as if they are about to ride off to war against him. The Naba emerges. His cannon, a gift from the French, ironically, is fired, and he pacifies them. It's a ritual reenactment of that constant simmering threat of internal betrayal, that danger in your own house. That our Ablis faced with Prince Kango, it's a living, breathing, weekly performance of the kingdom's core political tension. It's history, not in a book, but as a living, weekly social drama. But this, of course, leaves us with the final scholarly debate. Historians, sociologists, and modern Burkinab politicians still argue whether the profound endurance of these ancient Mossi structures is a source of national stability or a barrier to modern democracy. Is it a good thing? Is it a stabilizing force, a deep state of tradition that holds the country together, providing a shared identity, and a respected non-political mediator, the Mogo Naba, who can cool tensions when modern elected politicians fail? Is it a problem? Does this ancient, rigid, two-tiered system of Nakams, the rulers, and Tengabisi, the ruled, perpetuate a kind of feudalism, a caste system that runs directly counter to the modern ideas of equality, individualism, and democratic merit? That is a question you can't answer from a library. It's a question for the people living that reality right now. And for you, it's time to leave the library. You're walking out back into the night, but you're not in your own time anymore. You're back in the Sahel, just for a moment. You're standing on that dry, red earth. The air is warm, and the wind is rustling the brittle grass. The same sound you heard in the very beginning. The last ride isn't a single event. It's an echo. You can hear it if you listen. The faint, ghostly sound of hooves on packed earth. The jingle of a harness. The soft thud of quilted leafy armor. It's the sound of the SOBA, GAMI, the Ablis. All of them, still riding, forever, on the timeline of history. They are riding in the pages of that book, and in the Nabaskango ritual, and in the quiet, stubborn pride of Ouagadougou itself. The queen, that brilliant Mancala player, is still moving her seeds, still protecting her people. And now, as the sound of those hooves begins to fade, you can let it go. The air around you is no longer the dry, dusty air of the Sahel. It's the air of your own room, cool and familiar, stirred by the soft, rhythmic hum of your fan. You are no longer in the 17th century or the 19th. You're here, you're now. You're safe in your bed, the complexities of the past settling into the quiet of the present. The millet is in the granary, the millet shield has held, the story is over, and you can rest. The abless has done her work. Her strategies have brought her people through the long, dangerous night. And now all that is left is the quiet and the peace of sleep. The echo is gone. There is only the wind, only the fan, only the soft, steady breath you're taking as you let the story dissolve and let yourself drift away.